Part 38. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 380. When the G-Monster launched a long-range attack, Luo Guang was hiding behind a pillar. He threw away the tactical belt and assault rifle he was wearing, put 2 offensive grenades on his waist, and then held the gun in his left hand and the knife in his right hand, and turned to leave the bunker. His current position was blocked by the pillar, in a blind spot that people outside could not see. As for the camera in the lobby, he had already checked it during the battle just now, and used the electronic pulse ability to scan every corner. The G-Monster was rushing over here. Seeing Luo Guang leave the bunker, its brain slightly opened up and it slightly shifted the angle of the charge, and no longer planned to compete with the pillar. Luo Guang took a deep breath, and electric light appeared on the straight knife in his right hand, but in fact, he had called on the electric energy burst ability all over his body, but now he could control it more accurately. Seeing that the enemy was no longer running around like a loach, the G-Monster seemed to think that the opponent had exhausted all his stamina and decided to give it a try. It had been extremely hungry for a long time and opened its chest cavity. That was its big mouth for eating and also its hidden weakness. In fact, after Luo Guang shot Frederick, the independent consciousness generated by the G-virus directly occupied the head of the dead man, so when the body mutated, it immediately wrapped the head. After that, the G-virus moved the head to the chest cavity, and then used other absorbed human brain tissue to repair the severely damaged brain, and the head growing on the trapezius muscle was just a disguised head. But this does not mean that this G-Monster has a high intelligence, but it will mutate into a meat grenade launcher based on the most powerful grenade launcher in the hands of Luo Guang and others, which is already very good among biochemical monsters. Of course, what the mutated weapon looks like is not something that the G-Monster can decide. As for its eyeballs, they are different from the eyeballs of the Plaka parasite monster. The eyeballs of the Plaka parasite monster are the parasite sensing devices, while the eyes of the G-Monster are real eyes that can observe prey, just like human eyes. But this G-Monster is much more cunning than G. William, hiding his weaknesses. However, it is called a weakness, but that place is relatively more vulnerable, and it is also the most critical organ for the G-Monster to confirm the location of the prey. Just like when humans fight, inserting eyes and eyeballs has always been a powerful attack move. The open chest finally allowed Luo Guang to see the location of the G-Monster's weakness. A flash of lightning. In the eyes of Leon holding a telescope, the G-Monster entered the back of the pillar that he could not see. When it appeared from the other side of the pillar, its body continued to move forward due to inertia, but it had been broken into pieces and fell to the ground. The G-Monster did not even make a wail. It could not even catch Luo Guang's movements and its consciousness went black, and it was taken over by the instinct of the G-virus. Because of Luo Guang's words, Jill, who had been staring at the G-Monster, looked at Luo Guang with surprise. Although she knew that Luo Guang was very strong and that she was now 10 times stronger than when she was in Raccoon City. She originally thought that she had caught up with Luo Guang, but she didn't expect that she was still far behind. Her boyfriend seemed like a ghost. She only saw that the monster went straight through Luo Guang and then broke into several pieces. She didn't see her boyfriend's handsome appearance when he drew his sword at all. Luo Guang, this. Leon's radio communication came, and he and Jill said in unison. Let's talk about it later. The G-Monster is not that easy to die. Luo Guang turned and looked at the G-Monster on the ground. As expected, the pieces of meat were converging in the same direction. Luo Guang threw the offensive grenade directly, blowing the pieces into blood and flesh, but this could only delay the recovery time of the G-Monster. So, he pressed the call button on the headset and asked, Leon, what's the situation now? If possible, I plan to use the Institute's self-destruct system to directly deal with the G-Monster. People from Wilf Arma Pharmaceuticals are here and are entering the research area from the emergency passage. Don't throw garbage down there, Leon said quickly. Jill came to Luo Guang, looked at the recovering G-monster, and said, "What should I do? Those researchers have not completely evacuated yet, so they can't use the self-destruct system for the time being." Luo Guang did not relax his vigilance, and his eyes did not leave the G-monster. Leon interrupted, "The BSAA helicopter is coming soon. In addition to the weapons on the helicopter, the passengers have also specially prepared flamethrowers. Let's give them to them when the time comes." They were able to temporarily defeat the G-monster, which was considered a perfect completion of the mission, so Luo Guang did not take any further action, such as roasting the monster. When Luo Guang was a child playing the Resident Evil game, William Boss infected with the G-virus gave him a lot of shock and was stuck for a while. At that time, there were no video guides, no money to buy guidebooks, and no omnipotent neighbor brother, so he could only rack his brains to solve the problem by himself. After crossing to this world, he was lucky not to meet G. William in Raccoon City, but the goddess of vengeance was not easy to mess with. In fact, Luo Guang cut the G-monster into pieces, which seemed to cause great damage, but the opponent was not a human, so this kind of injury only looked scary. In fact, the damage caused was not as much as the damage caused by the bullet cavity effect, so the energy consumed by the G-monster to repair was not much. Now the fragments seem to be merging very slowly, which is the result of the previous consumption, but this also meets his need to delay time now. Luo Guang just sighed that he was no longer afraid of the big boss he was afraid of when he was a child. He did not have the mentality of a strong man who wanted to constantly face strong enemies and train himself. For him, the weaker the biological weapons and monsters, the better. Of course, in order to protect his beloved, he did not mind becoming stronger. Under the harassment of Luo Guang and Jill, the energy in the G-monster's body became less and less, and even if it was refused, its size was reduced by half. After the recovery, the G-monster's broken arm grew back, and the meat grenade launcher and the heavy hump on its back disappeared, replaced by 4 arms with 5-fingered bone blades extending from the back. At the same time, bone armor was covered irregularly everywhere on its body, and the swollen muscle lines were messy, but it was certain that these would strengthen the G-monster's defense. Without the heavy hump and broken arm repair, the relatively symmetrical G-monster on both sides finally restored its body balance to normal, and could run faster and unlock the ability to jump. It looked much stronger than before, and there was not much difference for Luo Guang and Jill, except that the way of dealing with it had changed. Luo Guang did not cut the opponent into pieces again, because he received a communication from Leon, so he did not need to continue to deprive the enemy of his ability to move. The helicopter of BSAA is coming. Hearing the sound of the helicopter, Luo Guang pretended to run at full speed and ran out of the institute with Jill. "Be careful," he looked back and saw the G-monster using the 4 arms on its back to support the ground and pounce on him, shouting and gently pushing Jill beside him. Jill immediately understood, and jumped to the left and right with Luo Guang to avoid the attack. The G-monster appeared in the park in front of the institute, exposed to the police, and those people finally saw the hideous appearance of the monster. Some guys who had boasted to their colleagues before couldn't help but feel weak in their legs at this moment, especially when they saw Jill using an assault rifle to hit the monster, but it didn't cause any ripples, as if the enemy didn't feel anything. They looked at the small pistol in their hands and couldn't help but be grateful for Leon's previous decision. Just when they were worried that they might have to go to the battlefield to face the monster in person, several fully armed guys passed by them and walked towards the place where the G-monster was without hesitation. "Hey, who are you?" one of the police officers reacted from his surprise and asked loudly about the other party's identity. The last person walking stopped and turned around and said, "We are the Alpha team of the BSAA Americas division. If you don't want to fight with the monster, you'd better speak more quietly." After saying that, he caught up with his teammates without looking back. Taking advantage of the G-monster's another attack that missed, Jill threw out the 2 offensive grenades on her body to calm the enemy. Almost at the moment the grenade exploded, a burst of gunfire came, hitting the G-monster and making it retreat again and again. The sound of the helicopter's propellers became louder and louder. The M2 Browning large-caliber heavy machine gun installed on the side of the helicopter's hatch was ready to fire at the moment when the BSAA Alpha team ran out of bullets. Under the conscious control of the heavy machine gunner, the arms and limbs that grew out of the back of the G-monster were directly torn off by bullets. It collapsed to the ground again, roaring helplessly. But soon, a series of .50 BMG bullets shut it up and it was silent. "Confirm that the target has lost the ability to move," the deputy captain of the Alpha team on the ground said, and then commanded his teammates who were carrying flamethrowers to make up for it. The Flame BFT-01 flamethrower they used was a flamethrower developed by BSAA specifically for biochemical crisis events. B stands for BSAA, foot stands for weapon type, and 01 means the first generation of products. This weapon is based on the appearance of the classic weapon M901-7 flamethrower of the Lighthouse country. It has a maximum range of 30 meters and can spray flames up to 1800 degrees Celsius, which is enough to deal with most biochemical crisis events. Two BSAA soldiers holding flamethrowers began to move left and right, forming a corner, evenly burning the G-monsters on the ground. This set of procedures was developed by Chris to deal with biochemical monsters with strong self-repair ability. As for Luo Guang, he stopped shooting when the BSAA people came to take over. After Luo Guang cleaned and disinfected the invisible straight knife, he bypassed the BSAA firepower network and met with Jill. Looking at the busy BSAA people, Luo Guang said, "Chris doesn't seem to be here." They knew that Chris was the captain of the Alpha team, but the muscles of the BSAA soldiers on the scene were far less than Chris, so Luo Guang asked this question. "It's possible that he's on the helicopter. He's a pretty good helicopter pilot. I took a look, and he didn't seem to be among the people flying in the sky." Luo Guang was a little curious about why Chris didn't come. He didn't believe that Claire and Steve didn't tell him about the situation here after leaving the institute. Jill looked up at the helicopter. From her angle, she couldn't see the person in the cockpit at all. She said, "If he really didn't come, it might be because there was a biohazard somewhere else, so he wasn't here." She didn't think Chris wouldn't come here if he had time. In fact, Chris was working hard in the office and didn't go out to perform anti-biochemical tasks. As the director of the BSAA branch, he could naturally put down those boring paperwork and come here to participate in the mission of defeating the G-monster, but since their Christmas party, Chris decided to learn from Jill and gradually retreat to the second line to escort his subordinates. He was in his prime and was not in a hurry to get married and pregnant. Chris just planned to find a suitable successor for himself in advance because he was not sure how long he could fight on the front line. Any small mistake might cost him his life, so it was not too early to start looking for a successor now. In addition, the betrayal of his captain Wesker in the mansion incident made him understand how important a qualified leader is. In order to prevent his subordinates from repeating the same mistakes, he felt that he had to be a good leader of everyone. Chris is not as bad at studying as he looks. He has a high school diploma. The reason why he did not go to college was not because of his poor grades, but because his parents died and he chose to work in society after graduating from high school so that his sister could focus on her studies. With a high school diploma, he did not work as a dishwasher or a white-collar worker, but joined the Lighthouse Army and became an excellent Air Force pilot. This shows his learning ability. According to the original plan, Chris, who aspires to become an officer, had the idea of entering a military university during his service. He also took the ACT, American College Test, which is the Lighthouse University entrance examination, and achieved excellent results. But unfortunately, he later clashed with his leaders many times, so he left the Air Force before the plan was implemented. Pulling his eyes from Chris, who was working hard, back to Luo Guang and his team. Luo Guang watched the G-monster being ignited by the flames, and the body that had been motionless responded again. Through the firelight, he found that these pieces of meat with the G-virus were multiplying rapidly. The scorched skin fell off, but the newly grown tender meat was instantly cooked again by the flames. Several BSAA soldiers were like professional barbecue chefs, holding flamethrowers and carefully burning the G-monster to ashes. After burning it clean, they also took the engineer shovel and carefully went over to break the charcoal blocks one by one to make sure there was no residue. After confirming that the G-monster was solved, the deputy captain of the Alpha team called Chris to report the situation. In fact, under normal circumstances, BSAA would set up an isolation area in this area, block the barbecue field, strictly guard it, disinfect it day and night, and finally use professional instruments to take samples and test to confirm that there were no fish that slipped through the net. However, this area is the territory of Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals, so how to deal with it in the end requires coordination among multiple parties. They just stayed here temporarily to watch the field. Have you solved the problem over there? There is an urgent matter. Just as Luo Guang was thinking about what to do next, Leon's voice came from Luo Guang's headphones. Meow, thank you for your votes and subscriptions. It turns out that the illustration function has not been publicly tested, and it cannot be used without an invitation code. Oh, evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 381. Luo Guang and Jill got up and walked over to Leon after receiving the notification from Leon. Leon was now staying with Tang Ning in the temporary command post. Before the BSAA Alpha team came, they knew that two people were trying their best to drag the G-monster. When they arrived at the scene, they did not see how Luo Guang and the others dealt with the G-monster. But seeing that there were no signs of injury on the two people, not even a scratch, they wanted to go over and chat with them to see if they could exchange experiences. In the face of biochemical crisis events, experience is also a very important part, so the deputy captain of the Alpha team had this idea. However, seeing that the two people left in a hurry, he could only put this idea aside for the time being. The command post where Leon was now was a temporary tent. He had it specially built because he saw that the situation could not be solved in a short time. Luo Guang lifted the door curtain and scanned the area to confirm the situation. Tang Ning was silent at this time, sitting on a chair in the corner with his head lowered, while Leon was standing in front of him, facing four guys in suits. Luo Guang quickly assessed the situation, passed by a guy who looked arrogant, and came to Leon. He asked Leon, "What's going on?" Jill followed his steps and walked in. Leon replied with a puzzled look on his face, "I don't know, they suddenly broke in to prevent me from commanding the anti-biochemical operation. It is also because they have been harassing me that I can't issue the latest instructions." As an anti-biochemical consultant, he may not be proficient in other laws and regulations, but he is naturally familiar with the relevant regulations of the anti-biological law and can apply them skillfully, so he took the initiative to put a hat on the other party. The leading legal advisor was the head of the legal department of the branch, named Yersin Grimaud. He immediately defended, "We have no intention of hindering the anti-biochemical mission." He knew that if he didn't defend himself, he would get into big trouble, but if he continued to entangle in this direction, it would only be more and more unfavorable to complete the tasks assigned by his superiors, so he chose a relatively mild way to respond. The superiors asked them to bring Tang Ning back, not to anger the other party, which would only bring unnecessary trouble to the mission. But another person behind him immediately retorted, "We didn't know you were directing the anti-biochemical crisis incident. You are slandering us." This person is usually responsible for using the law to deal with those powerless civilians. At this time, he unconsciously treated Leon and the others as ordinary people. Yersin saw that the faces of Leon and the other two changed slightly. Just as he was about to defend his men, he heard Luo Guang's words. "Now that you know, why are you still standing here? We will reserve the right to hold you accountable for obstructing the anti-biochemical crisis. After Luo Guang finished speaking, he continued, Jill, go and see who told them the location of Leon, see how that person showed them the way, and by the way, tell that guy that he is also suspected of obstructing the anti-biochemical crisis. This clearly looked like he was going to collect evidence to hold them accountable. Jill nodded, and without pretending, she really walked out. She received a message from her boyfriend, asking her to leave here, so that those who make a living by eating will not affect her mood. Jill really didn't like those so-called legal experts. Some of them were as good as ZK and were not trustworthy, so he went out according to Luo Guang's words. Yersin wanted to stop Jill, but Jill would not pay attention to him. He had no choice but to let one of his men follow him to ensure that the situation would not continue to deteriorate. But Luo Guang directly reached out to stop the other party and said, you are now suspected of obstructing anti-biochemical activities. You can't escape from the crime. Obviously, he saw through the other party's intention and blocked this road. Are you going to put us under house arrest? You don't have the right. Be careful. As soon as the arrogant guy finished speaking, Yersin interrupted him with a roar, enough. Shut up. The other two consultants also looked at their colleagues with dissatisfaction. Obviously, they also saw that the other party was dragging this matter into the abyss. The person who was scolded was also stunned. He didn't expect that his own people would get angry first. Originally, he was going to provoke the other party, then seize the loophole in the other party's words, turn his side, and pull his side back to balance, but what this person didn't expect was that Leon and his people were not equal to each other, and they would not be bluffed by him. Yersin blamed the other party for not seeing the situation clearly, gave a look to another person who acted more steadily, and then turned to Leon and said, sorry, I didn't control my subordinates. I will give a reasonable explanation for the misunderstanding between us later, but can we get things back on track now? Although the arrogant guy was indignant, he didn't say anything and glared at Luo Guang and others. The person who was signaled by the minister's eyes understood that this meant that he wanted him to cooperate with him, one to play the good cop and the other to play the bad cop, so he said seriously, but what he said is also true. He is not a policeman, and the BSAA has no right to put us under house arrest. He was pointing the finger at Luo Guang, because he knew Leon's identity. As an agent directly under the president, he naturally had the right to arrest anyone who endangered national security, and the biochemical crisis incident happened to be in this category. Yersin just didn't like the arrogant behavior of his subordinates, because if he and others were always at a disadvantage in the conversation, it would make it difficult for them to complete the tasks assigned by their superiors. According to the intelligence given by his superiors, this Luo Guang was just a member of the BSAA, and he didn't belong to those organizations in the lighthouse country that were not easy to mess with, so he was the best breakthrough point. Just as Leon was about to speak, he heard Luo Guang happily say, I'm not talking to you as a BSAA. Before being pretended by Leon, he couldn't let the other party get ahead of him this time. Luo Guang quickly took out the FBI ID and said, since you are so arrogant, do you want to bet whether the ID in my hand is real or fake? Leon also cooperated and said, even if the other party is not the FBI, it seems that there is no problem for me to let the BSAA people cooperate with the anti-biochemical operation. And his behavior of stopping the suspect from leaving just now is called a heroic act. In fact, Leon and Luo Guang both understood that the other party's counterattack was to compete for the dominant position in the conversation, or to strive for both parties to return to the same level. After all, whoever takes the initiative in the conversation will have the upper hand in the matter about Tangning. The two people's words made the people in the legal department of Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals change their expressions. They knew that they had found the wrong person. Since the other party could produce it, the possibility of it being fake was too small. If it was the CIA, they would not be afraid, because the CIA is just an intelligence organization and does not have the power to enforce the law, but the FBI is different. It has the power to enforce the law in the country, especially the anti-biological law clearly defines the definition of biological crisis and biological terrorist attacks, and anti-terrorism is one of the main businesses of the FBI. Coupled with the smile on the other party's face, it seemed that he had found an opportunity to complete the target, which made Yersin more alert. He suspected that the other party had been holding on to this attack just to catch him back to deliver the performance, and at the same time solve Tang Ning's problem, killing two birds with one stone. Suddenly, Yersin, who was constantly thinking, discovered something. Why was Tang Ning, the person involved, so quiet? Not saying a word? According to his superiors, it is impossible that Tang Ning was depressed because of the attack on the research institute, and he did not answer the phone afterwards, so they suspected that he was under house arrest and asked them to come to help. Yersin did not respond to Luo Guang and the others' words, opened a new front, looked at Tang Ning, and said, "Mr. Tang Ning? Are you okay?" If Tang Ning was not under house arrest and was really depressed, then it would be easy for them to report. After all, the intelligence department did not give them accurate information, so they were at a disadvantage when facing Leon and others. And now, except for the umbrella public trial case, there are no other cases for them to refer to. They have no idea how the judge will rule on the pocket crime of obstructing antibiochemical, so Yersin is actually a little nervous and feels that there is no need to continue to fight with Luo Guang and others. Unlike that arrogant guy, he knows who the laws of the lighthouse country serve. The kind of lawyers who think they can get everything by using the law in movies and TV dramas do not exist. They are just props used to promote the legal profession. Tang Ning was forced to stand by Luo Guang, so he was slow to react. He looked up and replied, "I'm fine." The standby here means that Luo Guang made Tang Ning fall into a state of depression, so it is normal for him to be slow to react and not interested in the things around him. Yersin looked at the frowning Tang Ning and was about to speak, but the arrogant guy shouted again, "Director Tang Ning, did these people force you to?" "Shut up," Yersin interrupted angrily. But the guy was desperate and ignored Yersin, and continued to shout, "If you are coerced by those people, please don't be afraid. Albert Ford will do his best to serve you. Even if the other party is the president's man, I have a way to save you." He had just offended the head of the department. If he didn't find a new backer, he would have to pack up and leave, or be ignored and bullied in the department. Ford couldn't stand being driven away, so he decided to give it a try and see if he could get close to Tang Ning, who had a lot of say in the company. "Ford. You bastard!" The head of the legal department immediately understood what the other party meant, and glared at him with wide eyes, as if he wanted to eat someone. The other two people in the legal department knew that Ford was going to tear his face off with everyone, so they didn't look at him well. This guy named Ford was so impulsive, and he was still a member of the legal department of Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals, which seemed to lower the level of the company's legal department, but in fact it was the result of Luo Guang's control ability. When Luo Guang lifted the curtain to observe the situation in the command room, while confirming the position of everyone, he also noticed the guy who looked down on everyone and looked down on everyone. As mentioned before, his previous experience as a social animal made him very accurate in judging people. He immediately knew that Ford was a proud and arrogant guy, and no matter what he did, people would not suspect that there was anything wrong. So when Luo Guang passed by him, he infected him with the Shinra virus, and then hinted at him, so that he could not control his inner arrogance. That's why Ford ignored the plan arranged by his own minister at the beginning, and wanted to show his talent in front of everyone, to show his attention to the interests of the company, so that he would be noticed by the people at the headquarters, and finally reach the peak of his life and replace Yersin. Luo Guang's method of infecting the other party is also very simple. When looking over there, he can just blow a breath. The Shinra virus that entered his body this time will not exist forever, Because Ulbert Ford is not of much value in his eyes, and he only needs to use him once. Tang Ning looked a little haggard. At this moment, under Luo Guang's suggestion, he was like eating shame lollipops, and was genuinely ashamed of what he had done in the past, so he was in a low mood. Hearing Ford's words, he shook his head and said, "No need. I was not coerced, but the institute was attacked, so I was in a bad mood." He omitted the mental journey in the middle and did not say that he was ashamed of his past actions. After hearing Tang Ning's answer, Yeltsin had already retreated, so he was ready to take this opportunity to leave, go back to report the situation, and then make plans. "Director Tang Ning, you really..." Ford's expression began to twist, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. If Tang Ning really didn't need his service, where could he go next? Tang Ning saw his past self in the other person and replied, "I'm really fine, don't bother me thinking about the problem." Yersin interrupted, "Ford, please don't harass Director Tang Ning. And you have been fired by the company. We will send you a formal notice when we return." Yersin still has the authority to fire his subordinates. Although it is not in line with the procedure, it is not a big deal. "You dare." The contradiction between the continuous frustration and the arrogance strengthened by Luo Guang made Ford's emotions excited. The violent fluctuations of emotions made him very uncomfortable, and an unknown anger in his heart was about to burst out. At this time, 2J police came in. They received orders from Leon to come in and drive people away. They were not specifically targeting Ford, but in Ford's view, these 2J police came specifically to catch him and leave. He was such a proud person, and he didn't want to be pushed away by others. This was not in line with his identity and was also an insult to his own value. Originally, he thought that he would be tough, throw down the company's documents and leave directly, but Ford suddenly saw the police's gun, and his eyes stayed on the gun grip as if he was attracted. Just when he was angry, his reason was overwhelmed by anger, and he was about to act impulsively, he suddenly withered, like a rooster that lost the fight, his head drooped, and the whole person was like a deflated balloon, with cold sweat running down his back. Because Luo Guang noticed that the other party's eyes were on the gun, he withdrew the hint before the other party acted impulsively. This made Ford feel a little relieved, and the emotional conflict suddenly disappeared, so he finally stopped and did not do something that would make him regret for the rest of his life. Ford had no grudges against himself, and losing his job was already miserable enough, so there was no need to suffer in prison. However, Luo Guang did not think that he had gone too far in causing the other party to lose his job, and the positions of both parties were inherently opposite. When Tang Ning became a tainted witness, he didn't believe that Chairman Peggy wouldn't vent her anger on the few people in the legal department. Most likely, the entire department would have to be replaced. But as long as they have the ability, even if they leave Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals, they will still be able to find a new job and make a living. This is better than leaving Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals with a tainted resume after a scandal. Meow almost didn't catch up. I don't know why the number of words is different from what I remember. I thought I had finished writing, but I didn't. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 382. Not long after sending away the uninvited guests from Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company, Jill came back. Luo Guang handed Jill a glass of water and said, "What did that person say?" Gil shook his head and said, "I have inquired in detail. That person was just an ordinary person who was caught by those people asking for directions. He was not a person from Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company. When she was in STARS, she often carried out special tasks such as incident investigation and espionage activities, so she was very experienced in how to interrogate and confirm whether the other party did something intentionally." When Leon heard this, He was surprised and said, "Gil, did you really ask? I thought you were just acting for those people." Jill replied, "Half truth and half lie. Anyway, I don't want to stay here and listen to those people confusing right and wrong." Apparently when she stayed in Raccoon City and wanted to expose the mansion incident, she was also approached by someone from Umbrella's legal department. Okay, the next step is how to deal with what Tang Ning said. "Do you have any ideas?" Luo Guang clapped his hands and asked everyone. "I'm guilty. Please let me atone for my sins," Tang Ning suddenly replied to Luo Guang. Luo Guang saw Jill and Leon thinking with their heads down, then turned to look at Tang Ning, took out his cell phone to record, and said, "Aside from your and Sanlian's involvement in the attack on the research institute, have you done any other bad things?" He left some time for Jill and the others, and asked Tang Ning more about the bad things he had done. Tang Ning thought for a while and said with a face of shame, "There are many more. For example, the G virus in Harvard's Weil Research Institute was actually sold to Weil Pharma Pharmaceuticals by me. The so-called black market transactions were nothing more than a cover-up, used to conceal the trading relationship between the company and Tang Ning, and to facilitate transactions between him and the company. Yes, although Tang Ning has now joined Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals, the two parties are more like business partners. He did not sign a labor contract with the company, and even because of the equity relationship, he should be considered one of the company's bosses. Naturally, the G virus in his hands would be clearly priced and he would receive real money. Therefore, after the people from the legal department knew that Tang Ning was fine, they had an excuse and did not choose to take him away forcibly. This was because they had the responsibility to protect Tang Ning, but they had no right to ask Tang Ning to cooperate with them. You should have left evidence for this part, right? I don't believe you didn't leave any evidence about Will. Farmer Leon couldn't think of a statement plan for a while, so he raised his head and interjected. Tang Ning nodded and said, "I have backed up the evidence in various places. There is a USB flash drive hidden under the spare tire under the trunk of my car, and there is a piece of evidence in it." Jill looked at her boyfriend, saw Luo Guang nodded, and asked Tang Ning to hand over the car keys and tell her the license plate number, and she went to get them back. Tang Ning complied. Luo Guang warned, "Be careful, there are still many Will Pharma people here." "I know." After Gil said that, he walked out. After watching his girlfriend leave, Luo Guang continued to ask Tang Ning, "Is there anything else? I once made a deal with General Grande of the Bajirabo Republic. It was me and the general who caused the biological crisis back then, but later I was cheated by the other party and failed to receive the balance." Leon had also heard about the biohazard incident. Luo Guang replied, "We all know about that, but there is no evidence to arrest you. Isn't there some breaking news?" Seeing that Luo Guang felt that the world was not chaotic enough, Leon complained, "Hey, aren't things at Sanlian Company exciting enough?" Tang Ning did not follow suit and said, "There is one more thing. In order to test the effectiveness of the vaccine, Will Pharma Pharmaceutical Company arranged a biochemical terrorist attack in advance in 1999, and then we established an experimental base specially used for clinical trials of vaccines." Leon leaned forward and asked, "Where?" "A certain town near Hyderabad, India. The population there is dense, the virus will spread quickly, and the labor cost is lower, which can ensure sufficient human resources to build the research institute." As she spoke, Tang Ning unconsciously she shed tears as if she was grieving for the people who died in the Resident Evil incident. Luo Guang didn't know that a biochemical crisis had occurred in India. He only knew that Wilpharma Pharmaceutical Company had conducted clinical trials of T-virus vaccines and antidotes there. Now that he thought about it, these so-called clinical trials turned out to refer to biochemical crises. Leon heard what Claire said about the incident in India, and Tara Sefer launched many protests because of this, saying, "I understand. Is this what you call a safe and reliable test in the drug report?" He clenched his fists. If Luo Guang hadn't said that he was using hypnosis or other methods to make Tang Ning change his ways, and he was afraid of interrupting the hypnosis, he would have punched the opponent and beat him into a pig's head. Does the upper management of Lighthouse Country know about this matter? Luo Guang asked Leon a question that was inappropriate to ask. The military has known about it for a long time. Military? But in 1999, weren't the T-virus vaccines and antidotes already in production? Luo Guang asked. Although he asked this, he probably guessed the reason. There are basically three forces in the Lighthouse Country's military. One is the traditional military force, the other is led by Organization X, and the last force is naturally the neutral faction. After leaving Raccoon City, Nathaniel Budd and George Hamilton, two doctors who developed the antidote for the T-virus, were quickly taken away by the military. Budd had a mature vaccine production method in his hands, and with his own will, he quickly joined the military's Anti-Umbrella Research Institute. George did not join because the Sunlight vaccine was not yet mature and he did not like being bound by the military, so he chose to continue researching the Sunlight vaccine with funding from TerraCypher. According to the information collected by Luo Guang, George seemed to have completed basic research and created a weapon specifically for T-virus biological weapons, which is now being tested at the BSAA. The troops responsible for the blockade of Raccoon City at that time were the military forces under Simmons, so the vaccine produced by Budd was controlled by the X organization, and its factories made a lot of money. Since the military attaches so much importance to this new vaccine and antidote, perhaps it is because the traditional forces of the military discovered the Indian biochemical crisis and cooperated with Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals and Tang Ning, and wanted to get a piece of the pie. In order to balance the power within the military, Congress naturally did not mind participating in it and taking a share, so there were senators led by Senator Davis who invested in it. Therefore, when Luo Guang searched for biohazard incidents in the intelligence library of Organization X, he did not see any reports of biohazard incidents in India. Yes, but I don't know the specific reason. Tang Ning shook his head and continued. Later, the Lighthouse Country negotiated with India and approved the company's application for an experimental base, so the company hired a large number of local people, and after the experimental facilities were established, those people were used as experimental materials for the sake of confidentiality. After that, they chatted for a few more sentences and confirmed that Tang Ning's bad deeds were mainly the sale of G-virus, India's unethical experiments and the attack on the institute, a total of 3 things. The next thing they have to do is to use these 3 things to attack those pharmaceutical companies. Jill came back with the USB drive and said, he didn't lie. He really found the USB drive. Let's forget about the computer here. We'll see later. This was the first time she knew what Luo Guang's control ability was. She didn't expect the effect to be so strong. She was glad that Luo Guang was not a bad person, otherwise the world would have become his one-man show. If Luo Guang heard Jill's evaluation, he would definitely add that he was not a good person either. Leon said, okay, make a copy for me when the time comes. I'll take it back to the president and tell him about the matter and see how the superiors will act next. Give me a copy by the way, so I can see how to use my channels. Luo Guang planned to ask the X organization for help. He could use the new information to improve the organization's contribution. After improving his status, he could use the Donald family's channels to see if he could get in touch with people from other families. It would be best if he could join this year's X organization's election conference and wipe out those families directly. Luo Guang started the conversation and continued, he did 3 bad things. If there is evidence of the Indian biohazard incident, it would be best to hand it over to Claire along with the G-virus deal, and have her mobilize TerraCypher's power to make this matter bigger. I have kept the transaction records and some photos of the scene at that time, Tang Ning replied. Jill asked, do you want to separate these things and find different forces to solve them? Leon thought for a moment and said, that's good. We won't put all our eggs in one basket, and we can also avoid everyone's targets being focused on us. But he had some concerns in his heart and continued, Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals is now a younger brother of the Lighthouse State. I'm worried that these things may be covered up by the upper echelons. You know, those senators also invested in Wilf Pharma. When the vaccine was announced, they made a lot of money by taking advantage of the skyrocketing stocks. Now they are still earning dividends, and they will not allow the stock price to plummet. Luo Guang replied, you can try to use the fact that those senators have shares in the company, and then cooperate with the scandal in India to make them give up. The forces in the Z government are complicated and not of the same mind. Naturally, someone will take advantage of the issue. He was referring to Organization X. Tang Ning and Sanlian Company may have the idea of acquiring shares in Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals and taking over the company, but these two families are not the only ones at the table. As long as there is profit, Organization X will naturally be like a shark smelling blood and stare at its prey. Okay, I'll take a look at the situation first and make a long-term plan. Leon nodded. He didn't think that with Tang Ning's help, he could directly bring down Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals. During the years he worked in the Z government, he also understood that as an agent, although he had many privileges, he was often very powerless when it came to matters that needed to be decided, and he couldn't influence the decisions of the higher UPS at all. It was only later that President Graham helped him, and he had a lot more say in antibiochemicals, but the good times didn't last long. In less than half a year, President Graham resigned. Luo Guang continued to assign tasks and said, as for the attack on the research institute, since you are now in charge, Leon, you can just take over this incident directly. Tang Ning, the tainted witness, will be handed over to you. It would be best if you can cooperate with Claire to attack Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals. Huh? What about Sanlian? Leon wondered why Luo Guang didn't mention the attack on Sanlian. Luo Guang replied, Tri-Union is now basically the most powerful company in the Global Pharmaceutical Federation, so I don't think Tang Ning alone can defeat the other party. Tri-Union, or Travis, is a multifunctional international company composed of transportation, natural resource development and pharmaceutical departments, so the word pharmaceutical is not in its full name. Therefore, when Umbrella ruled the Global Pharmaceutical Federation, the company was the least constrained, and its financial strength has been growing steadily. Speaking of this company, it actually explored Africa earlier than Umbrella. As early as 1800, Henry Travis, a member of his family, spent a lot of money to explore Africa, and his exploration records were compiled into a collection of 72 books, Natural History Survey. These books cover animals, plants, insects, minerals, living geological environment, customs, history, and traditions. It can be said that it is an encyclopedia of the African continent, but under the control of his brother, these books were not published too much, and the content in them was promoted as fantasy. Henry, the leader of Travis Trading, the predecessor of Tri-Union Company, did this not to suppress his brother, but because he found gold in his brother's book. At his command, Travis Trading began to exploit various natural resources in Africa and soon earned a lot of money. Then they used the information about plants in the book to achieve great success in the pharmaceutical industry, and the transportation industry between Europe and Africa also benefited from it. Finally, the Transportation Department, Natural Resource Development Department and Pharmaceutical Department became the cornerstone of Travis Trading. Not long after, Travis Trading carried out a drastic reorganization, and Tri-Union Company was established. Therefore, Tri-Union Company, which has a long tradition, is not comparable to Wilf Pharma Pharmaceutical Company, and naturally has no need to ask Tang Ning for help, and will not be easily caught. Tang Ning nodded and replied, I know the other party is from Sanlian Company, but the name of Sanlian Company has never appeared in our correspondence. The other party is very cautious and did not leave any handle. At that time, Tang Ning approached Sanlian Company to discuss cooperation, but Sanley and Company righteously rejected his proposal at that time, and 3 minutes later, a mysterious person called him and talked about the rejection. This is actually very obvious, but it is obviously not enough to use this as evidence to accuse Sanley and Company. The other party only needs to say that it is a coincidence to get rid of the accusation. When Jill heard this, he was unhappy and said, "Are we going to let Sanley and Company go like this?" Luo Guang shook his head and said, "Of course not, but we need to think about it in the long run. By the way, Leon, the person who turned into a G-monster, you should investigate and see if there is any surprise. That person was not the one selected by Tang Ning to inject the G-virus, and Tang Ning did not know him, so Luo Guang wanted to see if there could be any breakthrough there." Leon said he understood and would start to get busy next. Thanks for the reward, subscription, and votes. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 383. Leon arranged things, stretched, and asked curiously, "By the way, are you planning to take a vacation next?" Now he also knew this habit of Luo Guang, and continued, "You have been resting for half a year, right?" Gil glanced at Luo Guang, nodded, and said, "Actually, we originally planned to officially start work after the Spring Festival." Spring Festival? Leon was stunned for a moment. He glanced at Luo Guang before he understood what it meant, and then said, "That's right. You are Chinese, and the New Year time is different from us. Although there were some obstacles along the way, now that we have returned to the Lighthouse Country, there is no need to continue to the mysterious country and we can just spend the Spring Festival here." Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow dot. Therefore, Luo Guang smiled and replied, "Yes, so we will probably rest for half a month, and then we will go to Sanley and Company to cause trouble. But we have to keep in touch during this period." Leon nodded, set a small goal for himself, and said, "After this is completed, I will also go on vacation." That night, the West African branch of Tripler Company welcomed an important guest. His name was Albert Wesker. After the collapse of Umbrella Corporation, Sanley and Company took aim at the vacated biochemical weapons market and planned to seize the black market biochemical weapons market and make a fortune. There is no shortage of careerists in this world. Many people, including terrorists, are willing to purchase biological and chemical weapons at high prices to meet their own needs. Therefore, Sanley and Company does not intend to follow the path of Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company, which sells poisons and antidotes in packages. It specializes in selling biological and chemical weapons. This path is far safer than selling viruses directly. After all, they are also worried that some fools will use biochemical viruses indiscriminately and make the world a mess. In a world without order, Sanley and Company, which is not at the top of the food chain, can only become food for hire UPS. In recent years, Sanley and Company has been fighting for Umbrella's heritage and secretly researching biological weapons. At the same time, it has been contacting various people and expanding relationships with other forces. It also includes two mainstream anti-biochemical organizations, BSAA and FBC. As for the GIMZ unit, after their company inspected it, they felt that the other party was too small and unnecessary. Speaking of the GIMZ force, Hank and his death squadron had several encounters with the heritage looting squad sent by Triple Company, and finally succeeded in wiping out the other side's troops and destroying Umbrella's secret research institute. At Luo Guang's request, the members of the death squadron did not carry the logo of the GIMZ unit, but instead wore the shoulder patches of the USS squadron, making the Sanlian squad mistakenly believe that the Death Squadron was the remnants of Umbrella Company. Back to Sanlian's relationship expansion plan. First of all, BSAA received financial sponsorship, but O'Brien did not accept the supervisor sent by Sanlian Company because of this, as if he wanted to give it or not, and Sanlian Company did not dwell on this. They sponsored BSAA just to save the company image, so it can achieve this goal. After all, Sanley and Company, which is a member of the Global Pharmaceutical Federation like Umbrella, was also affected by the Raccoon City incident and is no longer trusted by the public. This will have a huge impact on their drug sales. At that time, Sanley and Company cooperated with the Lighthouse State Z government and provided a lot of evidence about Umbrella Company's development of biochemical weapons. However, these things were done secretly, so now they need to sponsor B.S.A.'s anti-biochemical operations in a high-profile manner to get rid of the biochemical crisis. The identity of the accomplice in the incident. Then it was a matter of sponsoring the FBC. Unlike BSAA, the cooperation between Sanley and Company and FBC is deeper and the relationship between the two parties is closer, including cooperation in new virus fusion research. This new type of virus is called abyssal virus. It was extracted from a very aggressive deep-sea fish by the University of Montreal in Canada, which was sponsored by Sanley and Company, during a deep-sea survey of the Medak Trench. The situation gave the virus its name. At first, university researchers only thought that this is a completely new species, and the results came from him. Among the deep-sea fish we salvaged, we found that its aggressiveness was not a special case. Other fish with different appearances also showed unusual aggression. After conducting anatomy studies at the university's research institute, it was discovered that these deep-sea fish belong to different species, and their violent behavior is not natural, but caused by infection with the same virus in their bodies. Soon, the people arranged by Sanley and Company in the University Research Institute knew the news and reported it immediately, so the company quickly sent professionals to take over the research. As for why Sanley and Company approached the FBC to cooperate in researching the abyssal virus, it was because the abyssal virus would give all experimental subjects uncontrollable offensiveness and mutation, which obviously did not meet their needs for the development of biochemical weapons. So they took a fancy to the Harlan virus in the hands of FBC, and made a request to Morgan for an experiment to fuse the virus. In order to achieve cooperation, they also gave Morgan as a gift the research data on T-virus biochemical weapons received from Umbrella's European assets. After knowing the other parties' cooperation conditions and receiving the gifts, Morgan readily agreed to long-term cooperation. He is now planning to create a biochemical virus that can be used for his own use, and at the same time develop a new type of biochemical weapon to replace FBC soldiers, so the research information on T-virus biochemical weapons is a great gift to him, which has accelerated the research progress. Phew. The reason why we are thinking about developing new biochemical viruses to replace FBC soldiers is naturally because in the biohazard incidents since its establishment, the performance of most FBC soldiers has not been outstanding, especially when facing biohazard incidents caused by new biochemical sources. There are often larger casualties. As for the issue of developing biochemical weapons, Morgan believes that as long as the newly developed biochemical weapons achieve actual results, the Lighthouse National Army will easily offer him an olive branch. The reason for creating biochemical viruses is very simple. If there were no biochemical crises in the world, then there would be no need for FBC to exist. As biohazards become more frequent and dangerous, the FBC will be able to gain greater power, allowing him to realize his own grand hegemony. Morgan hid his plan, only a few close associates knew about it, and the research laboratories were also set up on the 3 cruise ships he secretly purchased. However, Major General Scott Wilson of the Lighthouse Nation, who worked closely with Sanley and Company, accidentally learned some rumors from the people of Sanley and Company, so he quickly approached Morgan to seek cooperation between the two parties. At this time, Major General Wilson was serving as the commander of a war in the country of Pannenstein. His goal was to transition from the military to politics, so he wanted to be the Minister of Defense in this war that was dragged into the quagmire. To achieve some achievements naturally requires some extraordinary means. When Sanley and Company approached him, It was precisely because of his bottomless ambition that the Pannenstein battlefield he was responsible for allowed them to experiment with various research projects, such as the biochemical soldier project. I won't go into details about this biochemical soldier plan for now, but let's focus on Sanlian's plan. After cooperating with FBC, Sanlian Company was still not satisfied and set its sights on Wesker, hoping to invest in the other party's research so that they could get a share of the subsequent research results. The reason why we chose to communicate in the West African branch was because Wesker was conducting activities in Africa at this time. The person who received Wesker was Axela Janai, the president of the West African branch of the Triple Company and the director of the Biological and Chemical Weapons Department. Axela's grandmother is from the Travis family, so she actually belongs to a side branch of the Travis family. Inheriting her father's intelligence and model-like beauty, she grew up in an aristocratic family, which gave her a noble aura in every move she made, but also made her very arrogant towards everyone around her, especially men. Although she was extremely talented and was discovered by the Travis family at the age of 18, joined the pharmaceutical department of Sanlian Company, and relied on her talent to gain a foothold, her surname was always Janai, and she was just a member of a well-known family. Just a branch of the Weiss family. This resulted in her not being treated fairly in the allocation of various resources, making her feel that she was being looked down upon by the senior management. In fact, long before Sanlian approached Wesker, Wesker took the lead in approaching Axela a year ago and gave her free all the research information she was interested in about the T-virus. These research materials allowed Axela to successfully develop various virus-related biological and chemical weapons. Using his actual performance, he successfully won the position of Minister of the Department of Biological and Chemical Weapons, and at her request, served as the CEO of the West African branch of Sanlian Company. The reason why Wesker shares the good things in his hands naturally has his own purpose. After he seized control of HCF, the original source of funds was basically cut off, and the remaining industries were suppressed by Organization X, causing serious problems with the organization's funds. Therefore, he needs Sanlian Company's abundant funds and resources to support his research and development of new biochemical viruses. At this time, Wesker and Axela did not have a formal meeting in the conference room, but had a candid meeting in the private lounge behind Axela's office. She was in love for the first time when she was less than 20 years old, and she had long been fascinated by the handsome Wesker. In her opinion, only a man like Wesker who can be called a king is qualified to conquer her. And this was also within Wesker's plan, so he chose Axela, who was not treated fairly by the family at the beginning, to help him complete the new virus research plan and defeat his mortal enemy. Axela, who was aloof in front of his subordinates, was dressing Wesker with his own hands and said at the same time, the headquarters said they would transfer funds to H.C.F's accounts in multiple installments. The first batch of sponsorship fees totaled $120 million. Wesker looked at Axela's actions with a cold face and replied, "Your company is really generous." After Axela straightened Wesker's collar, he said, "That's because they not only want to invest in your next virus research plan, but also want to get some of Umbrella's legacy from you." Triplex and other pharmaceutical companies won the battle for Umbrella's inheritance, but due to the presence of GIMZ forces, they received much less than expected. Therefore, Axela's progress in the field of biological and chemical weapons has attracted great attention from the company, and it is also willing to meet some of her unreasonable demands. Wesker stopped Axela, who was about to put on clothes, and asked, "Oh? Your research on T-virus biochemical weapons is progressing at a rapid pace, and now you actually want more information about Umbrella? What's wrong with them? Isn't it right that these legacies have become outdated?" Axela, who had a please mentality, didn't mind the other party's side, and even thought it was a wonderful thing, and replied, "They want the G-virus and the legendary T. Veronica virus. Especially for the G-virus, Sanlian Company will cooperate with Tangning." In addition to Wilpharma Pharmaceutical Company, the purpose is to obtain the G virus samples in the other party's hands. As for the T Veronica virus, their company had only seen this name in a document from Umbrella. Axela generously showed off her graceful figure and asked, "Does the T Veronica virus really exist?" Wesker said, "Alexia Ashford, the developer of the T Veronica virus, is a genius rarely seen in a century." The other person had just tried hard to satisfy himself, so he who was in a good mood naturally didn't mind satisfying the other person's curiosity. Alexia is a female name. Axela seemed a little jealous. Wesker thought of his only friend, William Birkin, and said, "She died, and all the T Veronica virus samples and research materials stored at that time were destroyed." Although he did not obtain detailed research information about the T Veronica virus, through these years of research, he still understood the potential power of the T Veronica virus. Naturally, the fewer people who possess this virus that can rule the world, the better. As for why Wesker did not directly use the T Veronica virus, in addition to his pride and not wanting to use the virus developed by Alexia, another reason was that he felt that Luo Guang also had the T Veronica virus. After so many battles, he was convinced that he needed a biochemical virus more powerful than the T Veronica virus to defeat Luo Guang. The goal assigned by Sanli and Company to Axela is to confirm the cooperation plan, and to find out what other viruses Wesker has that the company does not have. When she met Wesker, she revealed the bottom line of their cooperation. As for most of the cooperation content, the two of them have already discussed it in private, and they only need to flexibly adjust it according to the bottom line given by Sanli and Company headquarters. Axela changed the subject and said, "As for the G virus, the company seems to be working on another person's idea. His name is Frederick Downing. He seems to have changed his name to Field Downing recently." The G virus was stolen from the Raccoon City Research Institute. Wesker felt sad for his friend William. The thing his friend protected with his life was stolen by a clown. Axela nodded. The company had already investigated Tangning's background. "Are you really not staying here today?" she begged in a low voice as she watched Wesker put his clothes in order and turned around and left for the door, hugging him from behind. Wesker pulled away the slender hands wrapped around his waist and said, "I still have something to do." After saying that, he left the lounge without looking back. Meow. Ixelajanai, there is another translator called Ikoslajanai. I tried to insert the picture. I don't know if you have reviewed it when you read it. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 384. Wesker left Axela's office and took the elevator to the first-floor lobby of the branch building. The reminder sounded when he arrived at the first floor, the elevator door opened, and he walked out. The general employee elevator opposite opened almost at the same time, and a group of people who had to work overtime for urgent matters had just finished their work and were ready to go home. Although those employees were curious about why Wesker would come down from the boss's special elevator, they didn't dare to say anything. Axela's new job was still burning, and no one dared to look down on her because of her young age, let alone at this time. Wesker was not interested in these low-level people either, and walked towards the door at his own pace without looking sideways. Google searched Can. I saw a brown curly-haired woman wearing high heels and black stockings pushed open the lobby door, swiped the access card, and hurriedly ran towards the elevator. Suddenly, the woman seemed to see something and was stunned for a moment, but she quickly continued to walk, ran to the employees, and asked hurriedly, "Is the office door locked? I left my home key in the office." These employees had some impression of the woman in front of them and thought she should be from other departments, so after they looked at each other, one of them answered her question, "There are people from other departments working, I wonder if they have finished their work." "That's good, thank you." After saying that, she hurried to the elevator and pressed the elevator button. During this period, Wesker did not change his pace because of this little episode. He passed by the brown-haired woman, passed the access control with a VIP card, and walked towards the door. The brown-haired woman walked into the elevator with an anxious look on her face. When the elevator door closed and the elevator began to move up, she breathed a sigh of relief, as if she was glad that the door to the office area was not locked. On Wesker's side, after the woman entered the elevator, she looked back and saw that the card swiping information was still on the screen of the swipe machine. The avatar inside was a black woman with brown curly hair, exactly the same as the one he had just seen. There was nothing strange about this, but he showed a playful smile on his face. The brown curly-haired woman left the elevator and saw that the office area was still brightly lit, but she did not go in, but turned and walked towards the bathroom on the other side. The place this person wanted to go was not the office area, but the data room on the upper floor, with the purpose of finding information about biochemical viruses and biochemical weapons in the computer room. This person was Ada Wang. After she escaped from Luo Guang, she entered a period of silence and did not carry out various activities. Although she did not show her intention to leave HCF or betray Wesker because she was knocked unconscious by Luo Guang's jokes on the helicopter, after talking to Leon several times about the Illuminati incident, her inner thoughts had actually changed a lot. She used to turn a blind eye to the injustice and evil in the world, but after meeting Leon, she was no longer so used to it. After resting for a while, she did not return to the HCF organization or contact Wesker, but investigated the rumors in the African black market alone. The black market trading of biological viruses has become unbelievable due to the interference of various parties, but the trading of biological weapons is developing quietly in secret. Excella changed the original mode of issuing transaction invitations on the black market dark web and chose the relatively safe trading among acquaintances and door-to-door sales. His chief salesman of biological weapons is named Ricardo Irwin. He also served as the director of the oil field under the Resource Development Department of Sanli and West Africa branch. He was arrogant, but he was absolutely loyal to Excella and felt that only he was worthy of Excella. Now Irwin worked so hard to get Excella's appreciation and praise. Aiden noticed that someone was buying and selling biological weapons in Africa, and through clues, she confirmed the identity of the seller. Later, she reported the intelligence that someone in Africa was buying and selling biological weapons to the people of the African branch of BSAA. As for the situation of the seller, Irwin, she did not tell BSAA because the backers behind the other party were not small, they would only alert the snakes in the absence of sufficient evidence, so she would sneak into the headquarters of Sanli and West Africa branch to investigate. Ada entered the women's restroom, not because she could climb the ventilation duct to the data room, but to change clothes. After confirming that there was no one, she stood on the toilet in the innermost room, pushed open the partition of the ceiling, took a luggage bag from it, changed herself into the clothes of a system maintenance worker, then took off the brown curly wig cap on her head, and took out the makeup box. Soon, Ada, who left the restroom, had the image of a thin man. Because the pelvises of men and women are very different, her body shape is easy to reveal, so she put on a loose vest to cover her thin shoulders and waist. After making all preparations, she lowered the brim of her hat to cover her face and began to move towards the data center. She has been working here for more than half a month and has investigated the situation here in detail. She had deliberately damaged the data transmission route before and called the maintenance personnel, so her clothes were the same as the maintenance personnel who came over. The data room of Sanli and Company is managed by a dedicated person, and the company in charge is a subsidiary of Sanli and Company. It cannot just wear a maintenance worker's clothes. At the same time, she also used this to confirm that when the security department saw the maintenance personnel in the camera, they generally would not specifically confirm the other party's identity, and were relatively lax. According to the initial plan, she planned to dress up as a maintenance worker and come in from the lobby, but it would be easy for her to get into trouble in the lobby, because the responsibility of letting people in was great, so the front desk would generally ask more detailed questions and confirm whether there was really a need for maintenance. But her sudden appearance in the building was always an inexplicable loophole, so she had to act quickly this time and evacuate with the intelligence she got. The road to the door of the data room was safe. Although she encountered a patrolling security team, the other party did not doubt Ada's identity. The two sides nodded to each other and passed by. Ada took out the prepared pass card and swiped it directly to enter the data room. The security center also received the news that someone had entered in real time. The person on duty took a look at the display screen and the identity content on the pass card. The photo and the person on the display screen looked about 80% similar, so he clicked the button to verify. Ada had never been here before, so the first thing she did was to confirm the situation here and find out the location of the surveillance camera and the data storage library. The data room is very important, so a large number of surveillance cameras are still arranged here, but there are still many blind spots under the cover of the storage equipment. This data room occupies almost the entire floor. In addition to storage devices, it also concentrates a large number of servers, network equipment, switches, routers, etc. Because this place not only serves the headquarters building of the West African branch, but basically most of the industries of Sanley and Company in West Africa have to upload data here. Ada quickly simulated the route of action in her mind, took out a flashlight and walked deeper as if nothing had happened, entered the blind spot of the surveillance camera, and then came to the location of the data storage. Why could she find the location accurately even though she had never been here before? It was because this place was too big, so there were arrows on the floor indicating which area to go to. She then took out her prepared laptop from her backpack, connected it to the database, and started the program that had been prepared long ago to quickly filter out the intelligence she needed. Because she knew the existence of Irwin, the first thing the program would search for was his information and reports, and regardless of whether there was any mention of biological weapons, this part of the data would be copied and transferred to the mobile data hard drive inserted in the laptop. This was because she was worried that the other party would use code words or codes to communicate about biological weapons. After putting the laptop away, she took a flashlight and some simple maintenance equipment and began to walk to other places, walking and stopping, and occasionally swaying in front of the camera, looking like she was carefully checking the problem. This program does not only use the computing power of the computer that Ada brought to filter. In that case, the huge amount of data would make the screening process very long. Therefore, when this program is used, it will call upon the computing power of the computer in the data room. As for the administrator privileges of the computer, Ada had naturally prepared them long ago and stole them from the network maintenance company. In less than 20 minutes, her watch vibrated, which meant that the work of screening and copying data had been completed. Ada, who was pretending to repair the router, also stopped her work in time, went back to pack up her things, and prepared to evacuate. As for how to evacuate, she did not intend to leave directly from the lobby on the first floor, because her identity as a maintenance worker was not registered in the lobby. Ada chose the thrilling paragliding. However, when she opened the door of the data room and prepared to go to another women's restroom to get the parachute bag, a person blocked her in front of her. That person was Wesker, who had returned. "It's you, Ada." Wesker opened his mouth and said the identity of the maintenance worker in front of him. Seeing this, Ada did not defend herself, and asked directly, "Where did I reveal the truth?" Although she did pause when she saw Wesker in the lobby, she quickly made up for it. The figure is the first point, and the dark skin made by cosmetics is different from the original one. You slacked off the makeup on your legs because you wore black stockings. Ada used to like to wear clothes that show off her figure, and the brown curly-haired woman she dressed up before also wore professional clothes that show off her figure, so Wesker became suspicious after just a glance. The photo on the access control machine does match, but the figure on the outside is more like that of an Asian. Wesker continued, "After a little investigation, I found out that a rat had sneaked in. By the way, I didn't expect you to not contact me after escaping from Luo Guang. He didn't feel angry about Aiden not coming back to report, and he was somewhat tolerant of people he admired. There's nothing I can do. The people chasing me are chasing me too closely. These days, I haven't had much chance to find a job. Do you want me to bring back a few little tails as gifts? Ada said naturally. You are blocking my way now. It seems that your appearance here is not a coincidence, right? Have you cooperated with Sanli and company? Don't try to get any information from me, unless you don't want to live anymore. Oh? In that case, why are you stopping me? Wesker sneered. What's wrong? Can't you care about your employees? Ada would not believe the other party's nonsense, and said, then I should also care about my boss. H.C.F's recent financial situation is not good. At this point, she also roughly guessed why Wesker appeared in the territory of Sanli and company. It was probably to solicit sponsorship. What do you know? This is indeed a question, but Wesker has checked and can't find the person behind the scenes. Ada said, why don't you make way first? It's not good to block the door. Wesker was not afraid that the other party could escape from his palm, so he walked aside and made way. Ada did not choose to run away immediately. She was naturally aware of Wesker's ability, and she couldn't do it without some props. She faced Wesker and said, that is an organization codenamed X. She actually knew a little about the family, but she didn't say it. What kind of organization is X organization? An organization you absolutely cannot afford to offend, and they will definitely not sit back and watch you sacrifice so many humans. Ada wanted to make the two sides fight. Wesker naturally knew why the other party said this, but this organization that he could not find did make him have to guard against it. But he would not lose the upper hand when speaking, and he replied, God will kill God, Buddha will kill Buddha, no matter what organization the other party is. In the world I envision in the future, there is no place for them to exist. Ada would not say that she was a favorite in the eyes of the current leader of X organization. She was worried that she would be sold out by the other party, so she changed the subject. Oh? Then are you sure to deal with your life and death friend now? She understood what Luo Guang meant by life and death friend when he talked about Wesker. Don't mention that person. Wesker looked unhappy. It was too aggrieved that he was knocked unconscious and sent out of Sabatai Island by the other party. It was more uncomfortable than being beaten half to death by the other party and then deliberately let go. The opponent's strength has completely crushed him, and he still wants to play a sneak attack trick, which is really shameless. Thinking so, he didn't think about how many despicable things he had done before, but he didn't think about the meaning of Luo Guang's doing this, thinking that the other party was deliberately humiliating him. But this is a fact, you can't get around it. Although Ada didn't talk to Luo Guang many times, she at least confirmed that Luo Guang and Wesker didn't get along, and would not let Wesker's plan succeed easily. Wesker gritted his teeth and said, why do you think I'm looking for money everywhere? It's just to defeat him. When he mentioned Luo Guang, his cold face couldn't hold it, and his expression became more rich. Ada actually wanted to run away when the other party gave way, but Wesker kept staring at her movements afterwards, so she couldn't use the little tricks she had prepared, so she could only cooperate with the other party and wait for the opportunity to come. And this opportunity came soon. Meow, thank you for subscribing and voting meow. I can't find a suitable picture of Ada's professional outfit, and the set of CG movie Curse doesn't have black silk meow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 385. Ixela received a call from the security center, and the security personnel told her that the VIP was talking to a maintenance worker in front of the data center. The guards had received a notice from their boss long ago, asking them to report Wesker's actions at any time and treat his words as the boss's words. But they didn't dare to report the matter rashly, but made a phone call after confirming that the maintenance worker suddenly appeared in the building and did not register at the front desk. So Ixala came to this floor with her bodyguards, ran over from the corridor behind Wesker, and asked directly, "Albert, who is the other party?" She quickly realized that what happened was that Wesker found someone with strange whereabouts and helped her stop him, so she didn't ask what happened. "She's my subordinate." Wex didn't turn his head to look at Ixala, and added, originally, "Hey, Wesker. I just disappeared after the mission, and you fired me from my post. The more people there are, the easier it is to cause confusion and distract Wesker." While observing the situation, Ada continued to say slickly, "Speaking of which, the final payment for my previous mission has not been paid yet. You haven't received the compensation for your resignation. Humph, before my mortal enemy appeared, didn't you plan to leave my organization?" How could Wesker not hear the emotions hidden behind Ada's words in the helicopter, and then said, "And you don't plan to come back either." How could he be deceived by Ada's words? It was just because he admired her very much that he didn't capture her as soon as they met. Ixala heard that the maintenance worker was a woman, and a nameless fire rose in her heart. She said to Wesker, "Albert, what is her purpose?" She used to call him Wesker before. This time, thinking that there were other people around, Wesker would never refuse her to call his name. Of course, there was also a bit of inexplicable comparison. As Ixala expected, Wesker did not correct her name and said to Ada, "Did you say it yourself? Or was it forced to say it?" Ada did not intend to suffer any physical pain, let alone fight with the 6 people present. Let alone Wesker and the 4 bodyguards. Ixala's muscles were also trained a lot, so she had to prepare for the worst. Ada sighed and said helplessly, "You know I am a commercial spy, naturally for the commercial information of Sanley and Company." While she was talking, she was also thinking about how to leave and buy enough time for herself. At this time, she couldn't help but miss the grappling gun that Wesker gave her. She didn't know it when she had it before, but now she found that the grappling gun on the market was not available at all. Ixala stood beside Wesker and asked, "Which company asked you to come here?" Although Ada could just say that she was commissioned by a member of the Global Pharmaceutical Federation, such as Medvedev Pharmaceuticals, which is a company that competes with Tri-Union. But her current goal is to escape, and she thinks Ixala will be a breakthrough, so she said, "Wesker, is this another new woman you found?" Again. Ixala's expression showed that his words successfully hit the other party's concerns. Although Ada's relationship with Leon is complicated, she is not a pure girl like Ashley, so she naturally saw Ixala's special feelings for Wesker at a glance. "You haven't returned to the organization for so long, how do you know that I changed women again?" Wesker said very calmly. Unlike Luo Guang, he no longer has some worldly desires, but he will not refuse the fat meat that is delivered to his mouth. In fact, Ixala only needed to think about it for a moment to realize that the fired Ada could not know these things, but she was too concerned, so she quickly reacted to Wesker's reminder. Ada replied, "I know without seeing that your appearance and temperament can always attract all kinds of women. I don't believe that you can control yourself when facing those beauties throwing themselves at you." "But you don't have any evidence, right?" Wesker snorted coldly and responded to the other party's accusation. Ixala believed Wesker and said, "I think she is just changing the subject. No matter what, since she dared to come to our company to make trouble, she will not be forgiven." After that, she asked her bodyguards to capture Ada. Ada's eyes did not leave Wesker, and she kept a close eye on his movements. Suddenly, she loosened the buckle of the shoulder strap of her shoulder bag with one hand, and at the same time, she threw the entire shoulder bag to the bodyguard who was coming next to Wesker with the other hand, and then she immediately turned around and ran away. There are stairs on both sides of the corridor to go up and down, so Ada doesn't need to forcefully break through the opponent, just delay enough time. A shoulder bag can't delay time, let alone stop Wesker, so her real killer is the incendiary grenade in the bag. When she threw the shoulder bag, her finger hooked a ring disguised as a zipper, with a silk thread tied to the button, and the other end was connected to the safety pin of the incendiary grenade. This incendiary grenade was adjusted by Ada, and the power was smaller than the original, and the safety pin was a little loose, so she pulled it off easily. The bodyguard blocked the shoulder bag and pushed it forward. The shoulder bag caught fire as soon as it fell to the ground, and a wall of fire quickly appeared, blocking Wesker and the others. The bodyguards did not dare to act rashly, fearing that they would not be able to put out the fire easily after getting caught on it. Almost at the same time as the smoke from the fire appeared, the smoke alarm sounded and the automatic sprinkler nozzles began to spray water. The fire chief at the security center immediately confirmed the fire and that no one was in the data room, and started the program. A fire door was lowered directly at the door of the computer room. Excella was very calm in the face of the sudden fire, but after being sprayed with water, her face was now terribly gloomy. She was unhappy that her hairstyle was wet, and she looked a little embarrassed, which lost her image in front of Wesker. When she thought of this, she turned her head to look at Wesker beside her, and just as she was about to speak, she found that Wesker was no longer by her side. Ada did not look back to confirm whether the enemy was chasing her. Those bodyguards were not a problem, the problem was Wesker. She did not think that Wesker would be blocked by this small fire. She had already held a flash bomb in her hand and threw it on the ground as soon as she entered the corner. She took the opportunity to crash into the stairwell next to her. She didn't walk straight up the stairs, she just jumped down and forward, jumping diagonally, and soon reached her target floor. After the bodyguard successfully put out the fire with a fire extinguisher, Excella hurriedly led people to chase after it, and at the same time, she asked the people in the security center to report the situation and the location of the enemy to her. Ada ran into the toilet, pried open the ceiling partition, and put on the paraglider bag. Almost without hesitation, at the moment when the door of the women's toilet was knocked open by Wesker and made a loud noise, she pressed the button of the device in her hand, and a huge explosion sounded outside the cubicle. Ada didn't wait for the dust to settle, she opened the door and rushed directly to the hole in the wall. The location of this toilet was specially chosen by her, and it was only separated from the outside world by a wall, so in an emergency, she could directly blow up the wall and escape from the scene. I didn't change the phone number. Wesker's voice sounded from her side, but the other party did not stop her. Ada didn't pause at all, jumped out of the hole directly, opened the paraglider, and flew away. The broken water pipe sprayed a lot of clean water, soaking Wesker's trouser legs. He stood by the hole and watched Ada flying away. Fortunately, the broken pipe was not the sewage pipe, otherwise he would not be so calm when facing the sewage. Excella came late, looked at Wesker with a worried face, and asked about his safety as soon as possible. I was not there when the explosion occurred, so I was not affected. But the other party flew away with the paraglider. In fact, Wesker had already arrived at the scene, but Ada's directional blasting did not have a particularly large impact on the toilet, and the aftermath and loud noise could not do anything to him. The reason why he let Ada go was because he did not have many available talents under his command. Since the other party had not clearly stated that he wanted to leave or betray the HCF organization before, as long as the other party was willing to help, he would spare his life first. Damn it, Excella felt very unhappy and said, she actually dared to blow a hole in my building. I will have someone issue a wanted order later. Not only is she wanted by this country, but there is also a bounty for the killer from the underground forces. Wesker snorted and said, it's not easy to catch her, otherwise Interpol would have arrested her long ago. After successfully escaping from the headquarters building of the Sanlian West Africa branch, Ada did not relax her vigilance. The city was still within the influence of the Sanlian Company, so after throwing away the paraglider, she came to the vicinity of the apartment she rented before. There was a truck she had prepared for escape. After getting in the car, she touched her pocket and confirmed that the mobile USB flash drive was still there, which contained the gains of her operation. After starting the car, she thought about it and took out a new mobile phone from the storage box in front of the co-pilot, inserted the SIM card, and after starting the phone, she sent a message to Wesker. Send this mobile number if there is a task. Although Ada agreed to Wesker's invitation, she did not intend to really abandon the light and join the dark, but to do what she is good at, a multifaceted spy. However, she will definitely not communicate with Wesker face to face because of the mission. She does not believe that the other party really does not mind what she said in the helicopter before. But she would rather not accept the mission than deliberately make trouble. At most, she would notify Leon and let him come to make trouble. Originally, she planned to stay in West Africa for a while, analyze the data, find evidence of Irwin's buying and selling biological weapons, and report it to the African branch of BSAA before leaving. But now Wesker appeared here, so she decided to leave quickly, go to the lighthouse country, meet her good dog, and have a good talk with them. On the other side, because of Ada's matter, Wesker returned to Excella's private lounge and changed into the new clothes specially prepared for him by the other party. Delayed by this matter, he was too lazy to leave and decided to stay overnight. It was a black suit with gold decorations. In fact, Excella thought white might look better, but every time she saw Wesker, he was wearing black clothes, so she gave in to his preference. Wesker changed his clothes, but not the coat with all kinds of decorations. Excella also changed into a new light yellow dress and poured a glass of whiskey for each of them. As for the capture of Ada, she had already arranged it on the way back to the lounge, and said that she would definitely catch the enemy and hand him over to Wesker. Wesker did not express any objection to her arrangement. He admired Ada more than Excella. If the two of them were to compete for the only spot in the new world of the future, he would kick Excella out of the car without hesitation. This had nothing to do with intelligence, background, and other things. He had his own set of standards. In the new world he envisioned, the new biochemical virus he developed would allow humans to evolve again. But many humans were not qualified to evolve, because only the chosen ones could adapt to the new biochemical virus and complete the transformation. According to his analysis of the blood samples of the two, Ada's adaptability was obviously better. But admiration is admiration. If Ada cannot escape and survive, then nothing can be said, so this is a test for Ada to return to HCF. After the two clinked glasses, Excella drank the wine in one gulp, and her body, which felt a little cold because of being wet just now, also warmed up. When she was thinking about how to spend the long night happily with a ruddy face, Wesker spoke. What did the other party do in the database? Did your subordinates report it? Wesker didn't believe that Ada's purpose was the commercial secrets of Sanlian Company. He intuitively thought that she had other intentions. When Excella heard this, she immediately took out a dedicated walkie-talkie and asked her subordinates for details. The system engineer in charge of daily maintenance was busy at this time, but he still responded immediately, saying, "We found that the other party had traces of stealing data from the database, but the specific theft still needs system confirmation. Ada's screening program will clean up browsing traces, but for professionals, this method is outdated. Where is the computer in the enemy's bag? It was burned and the data inside cannot be recovered," the other party answered truthfully. Excella gave the order and said, "Answer immediately after confirming the situation." Received. Boss, although not all of them have been confirmed, we found that a person appeared many times in the stolen data. Excella raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's the name?" "Ricardo Irwin." "I know, you go ahead." When Wesker saw the other party hang up the call, he asked Excella with a serious expression on his face, "Who is that Irwin?" Excella thought this was something Wesker should know, and said, "I used the information you gave me to develop a lot of biochemical weapons before. One of them is already on sale, and this Irwin is the person I arranged to sell it. The biochemical weapon being sold is a follow-up product of the zombie dog. People can use the chip in its brain to control it, and it can achieve good results in street fighting. A part of the share of the sales of this biochemical weapon is specifically used to sponsor Wesker, so he also showed a serious expression. If he had known that the other party's goal was related to his research funds, he would definitely not let Ada go easily. But now it is too late to make up for the loss." Wesker said, "Send your mercenary team immediately to capture her." As he said that, he also stood up and prepared to go out in person. Meow. Thank you for subscribing and voting meow. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Meow. Chapter 386. Luo Guang used to stay in the luxury hotels under the X organization. They were cheap and provided good service. The reason why he didn't buy a property in the lighthouse country was also very simple. First of all, he often traveled around, especially to South Africa GIMZ every few days to check the situation. At that time, he basically lived in the house near the training ground. Second, Jill took the position of director of the European branch of BSAA, and there was a high probability that she would live in Europe for a long time. Therefore, buying a property in the lighthouse country would only leave no one there for a long time, and there would be worries about people stealing things, and cleaning would be troublesome. Originally, according to the plan, the two should stay in the lighthouse country for more than half a month until the new year, but Jill suddenly had an idea, asked Barton for the key, and went to Margaret Town in Maple Leaf Country with Luo Guang. It was the first place Luo Guang and Jill came to after leaving Raccoon City, and he also successfully took Jill's first blood here. This is a small border town with a small population, simple folk customs, and everyone's life is also slow-paced. It is a place suitable for self-cultivation. Jill used the key given by Barton to open the door and confirmed the situation inside. It was no different from when Jill and the others left. No one sneaked in to steal things. It would take a while for such a remote place to hire a part-time cleaner, so Luo Guang and Jill cleaned the whole house by themselves. Then Jill was responsible for packing the luggage, while Luo Guang went out to buy groceries and came back to cook. Jill packed the luggage, and Luo Guang also came back after buying groceries, and the two cooked together. The two sat at the dining table, poured a glass of fine wine, and were about to toast and eat when Luo Guang's cell phone rang. "Luo Guang, did I disturb you?" Leon's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. "Sorry for disturbing you, I was just about to eat." Luo Guang turned on the hands-free and answered bluntly. Leon smiled bitterly and said, "I haven't even eaten yet." Luo Guang felt that the other party was also busy, so he went straight to the point and asked, "What happened?" It had only been a few days since they left Harvardville, and there was no news yet, but with Leon there, Luo Guang and the others were more aware of the current situation. Leon said, "I took Tang Ning to meet the president, and after the president learned about the situation, he asked me to hand Tang Ning over to the FBC and let them be responsible for this biological attack case." Luo Guang was surprised and said, "Why is it so troublesome? Biohazard crimes can be prosecuted directly in the name of the country, right? There is no issue of jurisdiction at all." I also asked the reason. The president said to let special anti-biohazard people be responsible for biohazard matters. The current president of the lighthouse country meant to hand over all anti-biohazard matters to the FBC for handling. They sponsored so much money to the FBC, so they naturally wanted to make the best use of it. "Is Tang Ning still under your care now?" Luo Guang was confirming Tang Ning's situation. "Yes, do you have any ideas?" Luo Guang made a joke, saying, "I don't have any ideas about men. We'd better have a copy of the evidence he collected. I took Tang Ning to collect it before I took him back to Washington. Leon naturally knew what to do, and then said, and I have uploaded it to the internet. You can take a look at it yourself, and discuss with Claire how to mobilize the power of Terra Sephir. The website he uploaded was an online forum called Avengers Alliance that Luo Guang asked Hong Huang to build. It was named by Luo Guang in memory of Diego Salazar. This forum is VIP. For the time being, only Luo Guang and some of the protagonists of Resident Evil have accounts to log in. If you don't log in, even if others enter the website, they will only see a lot of anti-Resident Evil propaganda. Why is it a part of the protagonist group? It's because people like Ada, Jack, and Carlos have not been invited by Luo Guang for the time being. Ada is now both good and evil, and Jack is not yet an adult. As for Carlos, he seems to enjoy his current life, so there is no need to add more responsibilities to his shoulders. Moreover, he is now the captain of the GIMZ Angel team. He often cannot avoid his teammates to do things, and it is not easy to hide things. So in addition to Luo Guang, Leon, Steve, and Claire, the other members are only the 4 former STARS members, namely Jill, Chris, Rebecca, and Barton. In addition to exchanging information, this forum also serves as a network disk, which is convenient for everyone to view the information collected by everyone and confirm the situation around the world. Got it, I will contact Claire tonight. Luo Guang had reported the situation to the X organization before leaving Harvardville. Since it had nothing to do with Ada, he did not disturb Simmons and reported it through the official channels of the X organization. After that, except for receiving a message that several million US dollars were deposited into the bank account, no one from the X organization contacted him. Leon nodded and said, "But I still have good news." It was also because of this that his tone of conversation just now was not depressed. Jill was a little curious, so she leaned over to the phone and asked, "What good news?" Leon didn't keep the secret and said directly, "Although the president asked me to transfer the case to the FBC, he also arranged for me to form a supervision team to monitor the situation at the FBC, so I contacted Bruce you introduced. The specific candidates were also selected by him personally, and the president was responsible for stamping and issuing the note. Originally, Luo Guang was his first choice, but unfortunately the other party had to take a vacation, and he couldn't explain to the president why the other party had to take such a long vacation before he could take up his post." Luo Guang smiled and asked about the meeting between the two, saying, "That's good, what's your first impression?" Leon was still quite concerned about the person introduced by Luo Guang, and replied, "He is indeed a guy with a strong sense of justice." The two had a good chat when they met for the first time. Luo Guang said, "Next, you should take steady steps and strive to become a regular employee. The regularization here means turning the supervision team into a special anti-biochemical team in the Secret Service." Leon had a goal to strive for, and said with high will, "Of course, I have planned it with Bruce, and he is also going to introduce me to a brother. It is said that the man also has a strong sense of justice and once investigated the biochemical crisis alone." For Bruce, the appearance of Leon can be said to be timely rain. Over the years, he has increasingly felt whether it is meaningful for him to stay in the Special Operations Command. He was about to submit his application for retirement when he received an email from Leon, which made him feel grateful. "That's good, keep going." Luo Guang did not ask the man's name. He could only use his future vision to point out a path for Leon, but the specific result would depend on Leon himself. Leon felt that the topic was about to end, and did not want to disturb Luo Guang to start eating, so he said, "Okay, I'll keep a close eye on Tang Ning and think about how to make the most of the evidence in his hands." But Luo Guang started a new topic, "I'll also look at the evidence and think about how to use it. By the way, have you visited Shirley recently?" Although he left the lighthouse country and went to the Far East after New Year's Day, Luo Guang still continued to pay attention to Shirley's affairs. First of all, let me say the conclusion. Shirley still can't leave the institute and get rid of the life of house arrest. But compared to before, she has an opportunity to go out for a walk, or to travel. Simmons allowed Claire to take Shirley out for 1 or 2 days every month. The reason is naturally not a change of conscience, nor is it that the group of rubbish in the institute gave up treatment. After the Christmas dinner, Shirley was sent back to the institute by Leon. The researchers immediately arranged a physical examination for Shirley and made a significant discovery: Shirley had grown up. Since the Raccoon City incident, they have periodically given Shirley physical examinations to confirm the impact of the G-latent virus on her. The most intuitive and special thing in the report is that Shirley's body has not grown in the past few years. Neither her weight nor her height has changed. The test using high-calorie food cannot change Shirley's weight. According to the results of this test, the people in the institute used this unusually stable G virus to make youthful beauty products and weight loss pills, hoping to earn some extra money and bonuses for the institute. But the G virus that leaves Shirley's body will soon resume its disordered and uncontrollable variability, and it cannot be made into a product at all. They once tried to reverse engineer the skincare products made by Umbrella using the T virus, and tried to use its ideas to develop G virus products, but it ended in failure. Finally, the researchers came to the conclusion that Shirley's body was solidified by the G virus and could no longer grow. So, when the researchers found that Shirley's height and weight had changed in the physical examination report, what a surprised expression they had. Therefore, Shirley had the opportunity to leave the institute once a month. By the way, after knowing this, Simmons scolded the project leader of the institute, saying that they were not as useful as an agent. This agent naturally refers to Luo Guang. It was because of his words that Shirley was able to attend the Christmas dinner, which caused a ripple in the project. Hearing Luo Guang's words, Leon replied, "I was not free that day, but Claire accompanied Shirley to play. She also called me to talk afterwards, and Shirley was quite happy." Luo Guang nodded and replied, "That's fine, it's better than worrying about whether Shirley would have psychological problems before. That's enough. It's not realistic to become fat in one bite, so let's take it slowly." After the discussion, Leon stopped bothering Luo Guang and replied, "Then take your time to eat. My takeaway has arrived." Luo Guang hung up the phone, then put it on the table and said, "Okay, let's eat quickly. It won't taste good if it gets cold." Jill picked up the chopsticks and started eating, saying, "I wonder what the FBC will do. Has your channel responded?" Knowing that Sanley and Company sponsored FBC and .b.s.a.a, she still cared about this matter. She was worried that FBC would be partial to others and make a big fuss about small things, and let go of the possible problems of Sanley and Company. Sanley and Company won't be impatient. As long as they do something illegal, we can naturally catch their flaws. Luo Guang was not worried about whether Sanley and Company would be defeated. The uncontrollable desire would make Sanley and Company follow the old path of Umbrella Company, and he only needed to wait for the opportunity. However, there is one thing that is different from his past. Although he is waiting for the opportunity, he has actually sent his intelligence personnel to Africa to collect intelligence on the Tri-Union Company. These intelligence personnel are not GIMZ mercenaries, but basically come from Spencer's legacy. With the help of the Red Emperor, Luo Guang naturally received all of Spencer's legacy. Spencer's legacy is mainly divided into 3 parts. The first part is various talents, which are basically concentrated by Luo Guang in the GIMZ Troops Research Institute on a plateau in the mysterious country. The second part is various assets. Not to mention the money in the bank, Spencer also built a treasure house, which stores a large amount of gold, various antiques and famous paintings and other artworks. In addition to the above, assets also include those companies that are still making money. Luo Guang did not touch the gold and money for the time being, but those valuable things such as antiques and famous paintings were basically handed over to Jacobus for auction, and then the money was laundered and either used to develop downlines, build an intelligence network, or used to buy the latest research equipment for researchers. As for the remaining money, he asked Hong Huang to find the lowest gold price to exchange paper money for hard currency. Luo Guang did not let Ji Xiu work for him for nothing, and gave him 3% of the auction fee. Ji Xiu also tried his best for that auction. He did not borrow the power of his father Vito, but relied on himself to keep those people with bad intentions out and guard all the antiques and paintings handed over to him by Luo Guang. So Ji Xiu also used this auction, which could be called a carnival, to officially secure his position as the heir in the family, making others convinced. The last part of Spencer's legacy is various biochemical viruses and biochemical research materials, which naturally include the contents of Spencer's God-making plan and Wesker's plan. This part of the information is not very useful to Luo Guang, who has his own ideas about virology, but it can be said to be a treasure for those researchers. The various umbrella research institutes used to be independent and had little communication. But now it is different. These materials can make the brains of those researchers in the GIMZ Force Research Institute burst into various sparks. In fact, for Luo Guang, the biggest effect of getting these is to weaken Wesker's strength. Compared with the game, Wesker in this world has fewer resources, so he does not have the production methods of the two excellent biochemical weapons, Cleaner and Undertaker. Jill ate a bite of barbecue and put forward her own ideas, saying, "I am going to take the initiative and negotiate with O'Brien to see if I can take the initiative to inspect those pharmaceutical companies." So she needs the matter of Will Pharma Pharmaceutical Company to ferment, so that she can better put forward the requirements for inspecting and supervising pharmaceutical companies. Luo Guang heard Jill's words and felt that this was also a good choice. Although those illegal projects can be put into the Secret Research Institute for research, it can also play a role in reducing the criminal space of those pharmaceutical companies. But the most important thing now is to have a full meal, so that I can have the energy to look at the evidence and discuss the problem with Claire later. Meow, I originally wanted to add a picture of Shirley, but I didn't find a suitable one. It's either a screenshot of Re2 or a screenshot of Resident Evil 6. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 387. Claire, are you free now? I'd like to discuss Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals with you. Luo Guang went to make hot cocoa, so it was Jill who sent a text message to Claire. Claire called soon, and Luo Guang came back with 2 cups of hot cocoa and sat side by side with Jill on the sofa. Hey, I'm looking at the evidence uploaded by Leon. Is there something wrong? Claire's voice rang from the phone. After Jill switched to speakerphone, she said, "We just watched it again." Jill has an idea. She is wondering if she can cooperate with you. There was a laptop on the table in front of them with the light on, and the page on the Avengers forum was on it. After she said this, she told the other party what she thought. Claire's tone became a little happy and she replied, "This is a good idea. But those companies should be able to hide easily, unless BSAA can find out the secret research institute hidden by the company." Apparently she also thought about how those companies would respond to inspections. How effective it is one thing, whether there is such a measure is another. There is no reason not to do it just because it may not be effective, just like not to install it if you know that an anti-theft net may not be able to stop thieves. And it was a good thing to extend the power of BSAA and fulfill the responsibilities of BSAA, so O'Brien thought it was a good suggestion when he knew the idea. Gil replied, "I know all this, but it can always make those companies restrain themselves." "I understand. You came to me with the intention of taking advantage of Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company, right?" Leon had already talked to Claire, so she quickly thought of this and understood why the other party called specifically to contact her. Just to cooperate with their actions. But there is a problem. She does not have much say in Terra Sci-Fi, and she is not in a management position. She spends more time running around, following up on the affairs of those who have been harmed by the Resident Evil incident, so that those people can be kindled. Raise hope and get out of the gloom. So, the people above may deliberately prevent me from assisting you. When Jill heard the difficulty Claire mentioned, she looked at Luo Guang. She also made an impromptu decision and looked to Luo Guang for help. Luo Guang took the phone and replied, "Claire, this is Luo Guang. TerraSef is just a non-governmental organization. You are not obligated to fully obey the orders of the management above, right? There are no rules and no squares. If we all act randomly, it will only cause trouble for the TerraSefs, which is not conducive to the anti-biochemical work." Curtis and some of his men used to be members of TerraSoftware, but with the actions of those radicals and the encouragement of various pharmaceutical companies, TerraSoftware's reputation has been damaged to a certain extent, so understand the research. Claire, who had been through the attack, became a little afraid to let go. Luo Guang disagreed and said, "I understand what you mean, but this matter mainly depends on your wishes. The people above TerraSef are inextricably linked to the companies in the Global Pharmaceutical Federation, and some managers are even sent there by the companies. Sanli and Company invested and sponsored BSAA and FBC. It did not invest in TerraSef. Naturally, this is because when TerraSef was established, Triplex Company had already invested money and there were people from them within it, so this time he was exposing Wolf Farmer. Regarding the crimes of pharmaceutical companies, they have no intention of discussing cooperation with TerraSef's upper management. When he talked to Leon before, it was just a temporary plan to distract the enemy, but after thinking about it these days, he already had a rough plan." Claire heard Luo Guang's words and asked in confusion, "What do you mean? I'm just an ordinary member of TerraSef." Luo Guang crossed his legs, leaned on the back of the sofa, put his arm around Jill's shoulders, and said, "Claire, you underestimate yourself." He continued, "If I remember correctly, reporters wanted to interview you several times before, but you turned them down, right? Please, I'm not a public figure, and I can't accomplish those things alone. It's everyone's credit. Claire doesn't feel that she is anything great, and what she is doing now is not her alone's credit. The reason why the media basically wanted to interview Claire was because some of them were arranged by Terra Sci-Fi. She was lively, beautiful, and had a good figure. She would naturally attract the attention of senior officials and wanted to make Claire their own publicity ambassador. Some of the media want to promote it spontaneously and have good intentions, but others want to make big news and expose Claire's true face to annoy her. So she continued, I hate the media the most. It was because the media in Raccoon City helped to harm others that led to the subsequent tragedy. Claire, you shouldn't regard them as enemies, just use them as propaganda tools. Luo Guang said, only by controlling the right to speak, can your screams be heard. He also felt that Claire's image was very good. If he could really serve as B.S.A.'s publicity ambassador, then Steve would find that he had many love rivals when he woke up. Jill turned to Luo Guang in her heart and joined in the persuasion, saying, that's right. For example, you have always wanted to expose the tragedy caused by Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company in India, but no one knew about it even though you screamed at it, and the media also reported you created as a villain who hinders the production of a virus vaccine. Claire also thought of that period, unable to utter a word of rebuttal. Although she didn't care about those bad reports, other people she knew felt great pressure because of it. Luo Guang saw that Claire seemed to be confused, and said, think about it first. We contacted you because we didn't plan to cooperate through the official channels of Terra Sci-Fi. Now BSAA also has the resources of the news media, so we will lead the press conference. If you agree, let's talk about the specific operations in detail. Well, Claire fell into thinking and didn't hear Luo Guang's words clearly. After saying goodbye casually, she hung up the phone. Luo Guang knew that Claire didn't like to do this, but from all angles, she was the best candidate, and only she could move people's hearts to the greatest extent. But it doesn't mean that without Claire's help, BSAA can't carry out its work. It just wants to use the people's hearts and reputation accumulated by this non-governmental organization to make B.S.A.'s plan more smooth. If he wanted to use Claire, Luo Guang would not deny it, so for his own plan, Luo Guang returned the phone to Jill and took out his own phone to make a call. Jill found that it seemed a little different from what she expected when she heard half of the conversation. Just when she was about to ask Luo Guang why, she saw the other party start to make a call. "I'll tell you later." Luo Guang smiled and asked Jill not to speak, because the call was connected almost instantly. "Hello." The voice on the phone was a little lazy. "Steve, what are you doing?" Luo Guang greeted. He thought that the other party had not returned to the team yet, and without Chris's supervision, he seemed a little relaxed. Steve was lying on the bed reading a comic book, and he put his phone on his chest and replied, "I'm reading a comic book in the dormitory, is there anything?" He knew that Luo Guang, who had a girlfriend, would not chat with him about family matters. "Really, study harder and improve yourself. How can you win Claire's heart if you don't work hard? What do you care about me? I haven't read comics for more than half a year. Do you know how strict Chris is with me in the BSAA barracks? I don't know, and it doesn't matter. But you have to know that if Chris doesn't recognize you, he won't bother to care about you." The recognition here does not mean that Chris recognizes Steve as his brother-in-law, but recognizes his ability as a BSAA soldier. Back then, Chris didn't actually want to take Steve, who hadn't even grown up yet, as his subordinate. After all, what he did at the time was also very dangerous. Later, he was moved by Steve's perseverance and persistence, and only let him follow him after making 3 rules. Although Steve always complained to Luo Guang or others about how strict Chris was, he would complete all the tasks he asked him to complete without complaint. After Chris's training, Steve's figure looks much stronger. As long as he doesn't speak out, he looks like a stable boy with a full sense of security. Although he was still impatient sometimes, he could completely suppress his inner freedom and unrestrainedness during the mission and became a qualified soldier in Chris's words. Tisk, of course I know Steve also knew that Chris's strictness was good for him. He then asked Luo Guang in return, not wanting the other party to take the initiative to speak, and said, "You called me to teach me a lesson and have fun, right?" "Of course not, I'm not that bored." Luo Guang continued, "I have something good to offer you." No, Steve didn't believe that pie would fall from the sky, and immediately refused. Luo Guang said with regret, "That's a pity, and I was going to give you a chance to improve Claire's favorability." "Brother, just ask if you have anything to say, I will never refuse." Steve picked up the phone, turned over and sat up, and threw the comic book aside. Luo Guang sorted out his words and simply told him about his contact with Claire just now. Finally, he added, "If we follow our tradition, you have to call me Godfather if I help you like this." Steve was silent for a while, and did not respond to Luo Guang's supplement. He guessed, "You want me to persuade Claire?" He would never call Luo Guang Godfather. This is a matter of principle. How could Luo Guang guess his thoughts? He said, "No, I want to find someone to persuade Claire. Can't I go directly to Leon? Or can't I go directly to Chris?" When he heard Leon's name, Steve was very alert and asked, "Then what do you want me to do?" "You are asked to be the speaker of the BSAA press conference to expose the crimes of Will Pharma Pharmaceuticals, and to be Claire's mouthpiece." "Huh? But I'm not as popular as Claire. How can I have any appeal?" Steve didn't think he had the same popularity as Claire. "Claire doesn't want to face the media. So you can go, and you won't be stage frightened." Luo Guang explained, "Claire is struggling with whether to go, so you can take the initiative. Use your strengths of being a talkative person." He found one thing: Claire and Steve seemed to have invisibly belittled his current value. This has nothing to do with low self-esteem. Claire is dedicated to the public good, and she is kind-hearted and does not realize that her behavior of helping others wholeheartedly has spread among the people inside and outside Teresef. It can be said that if she goes out to start her own business now, at least half of the people in America will follow her. If a scandal breaks out in Teresif, the entire middle and lower class of Teresif America's branch will follow her and leave. Relatively speaking, Steve is a bit simpler. His eyes were all on Claire, and he had been training with Chris for a long time before, so he didn't even realize that he had advantages and talents in publicity. The most obvious thing is that he has received a lot of praise during his anti-biochemical propaganda and education activities, and has gained a certain reputation among women of all ages. Steve thought Luo Guang was just initiating a preparatory plan, and replied, "I understand. You are actually just looking for a spare tire by letting me go on TV." Luo Guang laughed and cursed, "You're such a bastard, I'm not interested in men." Steve didn't understand what the other person meant. "Isn't spare tire a normal word?" Luo Guang continued, "I have to find a reason for you to go to Claire to discuss and express yourself, right?" He said this, but he thought it would be best if he could kill two birds with one stone. In fact, neither Steve nor Claire were the kind of people suitable to stay on the anti-biochemical battlefield. After hearing this, Steve finally understood what Luo Guang meant. Without saying a word, he said thank you and went to find Claire. "Steve? What's the matter?" Claire opened the door and saw Steve sweating profusely. She brought him a towel and said strangely. There was a distance between the dormitories on both sides, so Steve ran directly over. "I just received an invitation from Luo Guang, asking us to attend the press conference on the incident in India, so I wanted to discuss it with you and see how we can expose the bad things done by Wilpharma Pharmaceuticals." Steve did not ask Claire about whether to participate or not, because this would expose the fact that Luo Guang told him what Claire was confused about. Claire was surprised at first that Luo Guang came to Steve so quickly to persuade her, but after hearing what the other person said, she quickly calmed down. If Luo Guang wanted to find someone to persuade her, she should not go to Steve, but to Chris and Leon, so she believed that Steve was included in Luo Guang's plan. She took the initiative and said, "I'm still debating whether to go or not." Steve's acting skills were excellent and Claire didn't notice the problem. He said, "Huh? Why? Isn't this a rare opportunity? Didn't you also want to expose Wilpharma Pharmaceuticals' crimes in India before? But we have already obtained evidence of the crimes of Wilpharma Pharmaceuticals, which is enough for us to overthrow the company. Is it really necessary to go to the extra step and hold a press conference?" Claire paused and continued, "I understand that BSAA intends to use this to give them the right to proactively inspect the company's research institute, but as long as the company's crimes are exposed, this bill will naturally be introduced, right?" Steve didn't know what Luo Guang meant by doing this, and said, "I don't quite understand these issues." However, Luo Guang must have his own ideas for doing this. But he noticed one thing and continued, "But Claire, it doesn't matter if we help him, right? This is not a difficult thing to do, and it will help fight against biohazard." In Steve's opinion, Claire, who has a cheerful personality, is not the kind of person who suffers from stage fright, but now she is acting very resistant. Claire was a little depressed and said, "It's not that I don't believe Luo Guang, it's just, well, I can't pass my own test. I don't believe that those news media can really help us fight against biochemicals." She still expressed the knot in her heart. Steve said, "I don't believe those media, but I won't stop contacting them because of this." Claire, if we don't contact those media, won't the enemy also contact them? We can't just turn public opinion into give up the microphone to the enemy. He understood that Claire had always put herself in a weak position in terms of public opinion and had taken advantage of others. So Steve continued, I heard Luo Guang say that this press conference was led by the BSAA. I think he intended to establish a public opinion position for anti-biochemical forces, which is a good thing. But I was wrong. It was Claire. You can play an important role in this, why should you run away? He finally understood why Luo Guang made things so troublesome. Whether it was the matter of Wilfama Pharmaceutical Company or BSAA, it was all to establish a public opinion position. After all, it's better to let yourself persuade Claire. Meow, I set a goal for myself last month, but my coding speed is not as good as before. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 388. Chapter 381 Emergency Contact of GIMZ. Luo Guang told Jill that he wanted to use this opportunity to establish a public opinion position for the anti-biochemical forces. Because he was a consultant to BSAA, he naturally wanted BSAA to take the lead in this public opinion position. In the past few years, it was because he had a lot of things to do. Compared with those who only talk, they have to do practical things, so he didn't pay much attention to the public opinion for the time being. Of course, this is also because he got the propaganda and public opinion resources of the Donald family. The public opinion has always been fine and well controlled, so he put the matter of building a public opinion position at the back of the work list. During the Harlan incident, if Morgan used the original plan and used the fact that the former Umbrella Company accounted for more than half of the GIMZ troops to discredit the reputation of the GIMZ troops in public opinion, then Luo Guang would also use the public opinion propaganda power of the Donald family to counterattack. Unfortunately, the other party changed their plan in the end, and did not leave any evidence for Luo Guang, otherwise it would be FBC that would be discredited by public opinion. Jill, who had been defeated by the public opinion war of Umbrella Corporation in Raccoon City, naturally supported Luo Guang's idea with both hands. Jill asked, do you think Claire will agree in the end? Luo Guang thought about it, and judged not according to the Claire he knew in the game before crossing, but according to the Claire he knew now, and he answered, yes. In his opinion, Claire should just be stuck in a dead end. How could the other party not understand the importance of seizing the high ground of public opinion? When facing a person who is stuck in a dead end, it is impossible to persuade him to come back. The best way is to let the other party figure it out and sort out the problem, so Luo Guang chose the person he was least likely to choose to persuade Claire. As long as they talk well, Claire, a smart person, will naturally understand the benefits of this matter. Luo Guang continued to talk to Jill about his initial plan, saying, we have investigated Harvard's Weil Institute before. Although the attack happened, most of the public is not aware of it. We are still waiting for the investigation report to come out. For the public, the investigation report has not been released yet, and they are a little impatient. Let's not talk about the BSAA for now. The FBC and Terra Sefer have temporarily put the investigation report on hold because of the attack. Jill nodded. She also saw some rumors on the internet. Conspiracy theorists have begun to fan the flames. Luo Guang said, it is true that the institute did not find any problems as Tang Ning said, so I plan to reverse the situation after the investigation report and portray Weil Farmer Pharmaceuticals as a bully. This soft and hard is relative. Although India is also a younger brother of the lighthouse country, it has mysterious self-confidence, so it occasionally enters a rebellious period. If they really want to take action against a company, they are more than enough. It's just that the high caste group was not harmed and made money, so they let Wilpharma Pharmaceuticals do what it did. Compared with the human experiments and the spread of the biochemical crisis, Tang Ning's sale of the G virus to the company is not very important. In addition, Tang Ning will soon be taken over by the FBC, and then the sale will naturally be handed over to the FBC for processing. The FBC is about to intervene in this incident, so we have to seize the time and get the upper hand. Leon has been delaying the time to hand over Tang Ning to the FBC to cooperate with Luo Guang and others. I understand what you mean. I will call O'Brien as soon as he wakes up and goes to work. Jill took the initiative to take on the task of communicating with O'Brien. There is a 6-hour time difference between their current location and the UK, and O'Brien usually wakes up at 7:30 in the morning, so they have to wait until at least 1:30 in the morning, which means they have to wait for 4 or 5 hours. In that case, why don't we have a marathon first? Luo Guang's marathon here does not refer to running. Jill blushed, obviously hearing Luo Guang's hidden meaning, but she did not agree this time, saying, "Not today, we still have a lot of things to do." What Luo Guang said before was just a preliminary plan, or even a draft, and it needs to be discussed next. In fact, it was Jill who avoided the battle. Although her physical fitness would improve every time she had a deep communication with Luo Guang, the improvement was far less than that of Luo Guang. Especially after the Harlan incident, she felt for the first time that she could not keep up with Luo Guang, and she surrendered before her boyfriend was satisfied. The satisfaction here refers to Luo Guang's desire. In the subsequent travel process, there was a tendency to make up for it with the number of times, which made Jill have some doubts. She did not hide it in her heart, and asked Luo Guang at that time. Hearing his girlfriend's question, Luo Guang could only helplessly tell her that he had become stronger in all aspects. When Jill was not around, he could still hold it in, but when the two of them were alone together and the other party was his girlfriend, it would be too much to hold it in any longer. The system explained this problem a long time ago. Species reproduction itself is the instinct of animals. The strongest male lion in the lion group can naturally have more female lions. This is a natural part. But humans and beasts are still different, so Luo Guang didn't say much after hearing Jill's words of not fighting. He stood up and asked Jill if she wanted a cup of hot coffee. After getting a positive answer, he went to make coffee for the two of them, and Jill looked at Luo Guang's back as he went to the kitchen, wondering what he was thinking. Before O'Brien woke up, Claire called first. "I agree with your plan, but I don't want to throw Terra Sephir aside. You know that the upper echelons of Terra Sephir are not all for anti-biochemical crisis. Some of them only care about their own interests. They may not agree with you attending the BSAA press conference." Luo Guang said this in the hope that she could understand the problem of Terra Sephir, and he felt that the two sides did not need to be tied together and do everything together. The two sides are not a whole. The two sides can cooperate in propaganda and education against biochemicals, but it does not mean that Terra Sephir can get involved in other things later. Although in the game, BSAA also underwent a lot of changes and deteriorated. But he felt that in reality, if O'Brien did not leave BSAA and Chris and Jill and others would also enter the management, this problem should be suppressed. Besides, in the worst case, there is still his insurance. Of course I know this, but it is undeniable that most people in this organization really want to oppose the biochemical crisis. Claire continued, "We should not deny the role of the media because of the bad guys in the media. The same applies to Terra Sephir." Luo Guang did not argue. This was not a problem that he needed to worry about in his plan. He replied, "I understand, but I have a request." He first talked about the general process of the press conference, and then said, "I don't want to alarm the snake. It's better not to let Terra Sephir's company dogs know about the revelation of the crimes of Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals. The ambitious people in Terra Sephir will find that the matter is done. In order to maximize their interests, they will naturally choose to keep up with the propaganda of BSAA. In addition to establishing their own public opinion position, defeating Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals is also the main purpose, and they can't lose sight of one thing while focusing on the other." Although the X organization did not give him new orders after receiving the intelligence, Luo Guang would not just sit there and watch the X organization act. He had already asked the Donald family to prepare in advance for the acquisition of Wilf Pharma Pharmaceuticals. The Donald family, whose entire family was controlled by Luo Guang, took this opportunity to increase its power. If Luo Guang could ascend to the position of the leader of the X organization, he would naturally be able to catch all the top leaders of the X organization. Claire agreed without hesitation when she heard Luo Guang's request. After hanging up the phone, Luo Guang stretched himself, fell down, and rested his head on Jill's thigh. Jill said, "Whether Tara Sefer joins or not, it doesn't make any difference to Claire, right? If Tara Sefer doesn't join, won't the lower-level volunteers under it watch the BSAA press conference?" This is why Luo Guang felt that he didn't need to pull Tara Sefer to hold a press conference together. The only thing Tara Sefer values is the grassroots volunteers under it and the people's hearts that have been accumulated. Volunteers will watch the press conference, and if they want to win the hearts of the people, it is naturally not good to be tied to Tara Sefer, which will only divert the audience's attention. With his face blocked by the mountain, Luo Guang could not see Jill's expression. He was not a worm in Claire's stomach, so he naturally did not understand the purpose of Claire's doing this. Jill was just a little curious, and soon put the question aside and touched Luo Guang's head. As soon as the British time on the computer arrived, Jill took out her mobile phone and called O'Brien. "Jill? What's the matter?" O'Brien had woken up, glanced at the call notification, and asked. Although Jill did not return to the European branch, she still did anti-biochemical crisis work during her vacation, so O'Brien and the people in the European branch did not complain. Jill explained her and Luo Guang's plan and said, "I'm worried that the FBC will get there first, so we have to hurry up. I know that the American branch has already made arrangements. But you and Luo Guang should be back, right?" He didn't mean that Luo Guang and his team would return to Europe, but that they would end their vacation, return to their posts, and continue to focus on fighting biohazards. As for why the American branch had to communicate with O'Brien first, it was naturally because Chris was not as good as him in this area. "Yes, we have booked the tickets and will be back to the American branch of the Lighthouse Country today." Jill glanced at Luo Guang, who was resting with his eyes closed. They had just agreed, after the press conference, "We will also return to Europe." It was said that he booked the tickets, but in fact Luo Guang directly rented a private plane. He was worried that he would encounter another biohazard incident on a passenger plane. Although he was not short of money, Luo Guang did not have the habit of spending lavishly on things. Private planes were not necessary for Luo Guang. The route he took most often was between South Africa and the Lighthouse Country. If he wanted to buy a private jet that could fly directly to South Africa, the price would be very scary. Moreover, buying a plane is fun, but when it comes to maintaining the plane, you will cry. That private jet is also a vampire. "Remember to bring back more souvenirs to appease your subordinates," O'Brien said jokingly. When Luo Guang and Jill traveled on vacation, every time they visited a new place, they would buy local souvenirs and send them back to the BSAA European branch and O'Brien personally, so he made this joke. "Receive." Jill and O'Brien chatted for a few more words, then hung up the phone. Regardless of the fact that it was already midnight, they called Chris directly to discuss the press conference. Chris had gone to bed, and Jill was waiting for the other party to answer the phone when she suddenly heard a ringtone. Luo Guang opened his eyes, picked up the phone on the table, and sat up. "The phone number from the GIMZ unit, I'll go out for a moment." After Luo Guang finished speaking, he stood up and left the sofa. Jill nodded and was about to reply when she heard Chris' slightly hazy voice coming from the phone. "I said, it's already very late now. Is there anything we can't talk about tomorrow?" "Hey, boss, the GIMZ troops are in South Africa, 2 hours ahead of the UK." Luo Guang asked, "Could I?" "What happened?" Normally, except for weekly reports, Kaidi would not call Luo Guang rashly, so his first reaction was that something had happened. The Death Team and the Homo sapien team went back to the mysterious country to continue their training after the new year. According to his previous phone call with Hank, the training progress is now going well, and the antibiochemical troops of the mysterious country have basically mastered the antibiochemical warfare skills. The main problem now is the lack of actual combat experience, so they can only be allowed to conduct realistic simulation training to let the soldiers sweat more on the training ground. After the new year, Carlos's Angel Team, Wolves Team, Echo Team, Colos's Miscellaneous Team, and Tanya Team communicated with the weapon modification experts sent by the Glock company to customize their Glock pistols. Now GIMZ Force is one of the spokespersons of Glock company. After that, in addition to daily exercises at the training ground to improve their skills, they would occasionally go out to deal with some small biohazard missions. Biohazard incidents in Africa have begun to increase. The scale is not large, but due to communication and transportation problems, often by the time the local army or GIMZ troops arrive at their destination, the people in the outbreak area have all turned into zombies. And the biggest problem is that no one on either side can find the source of these biological crises. Caddy replied, "That's right. When the wolves were on a biohazard mission, they rescued a person, but that person lost his memory." Luo Guang asked strangely, "You rescued a person and came back. Then why not hand it over to Tarisef for resettlement? If the survivors rescued from the biohazard incident become homeless, they will basically be handed over to Tarisef for resettlement." Although Tarisef is a non-governmental organization and there are no specific regulations in black and white, BSAA and FBC also do this, so he wonders why the wolves brought people back. Kaidi didn't hide anything. She had already asked for details before calling her boss, and said, "Wolf Mom said that the other party was being hunted by someone. When they killed the enemy and rescued the other party, the person was already suffering a lot. Xiaoshang passed out, so she suspected that the person knew the cause of the biological crisis. She then reported in detail what happened when the wolves encountered this man." Meow, thank you for subscribing and voting meow. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Meow. Chapter 389. Boss, you asked us to pay attention to the surrounding situation before, does it have anything to do with the current situation? Kaidi asked after reporting the situation. As I write this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. In her opinion, Wu Song, who has great supernatural powers, must have anticipated what would happen in Africa. Luo Guang replied, "No, that's because of another thing. Also, I'm worried that they have relaxed their daily vigilance because of their current life. In this case, do we need to recruit some security personnel who are responsible for daily patrols? We can't have them do everything by themselves, right?" Kaidi felt that the sharp blade should be used in the right place, rather than killing a chicken with a knife and wasting Hank and the others. Use your energy to do things that ordinary security guards can do. Although the training ground has hired many assistants to maintain order due to the various businesses carried out by GIMZ, those people are not on night shift, and there is a certain gap between them and professional security. After all, no one would be stupid enough to break into a place where everyone has a gun and steal something or do other illegal things. Okay, then you can get a security recruitment information and temporarily recruit a team of 12 people. A large number of monitoring equipment are installed at the GIMZ training ground in South Africa, so there is no need to use too much manpower for patrolling. As long as the enemy can be found, the team at the training ground will naturally be able to quickly deal with the enemy. Luo Guan continued, "By the way, have you asked Samus about the amnesiac? The general manager asked me to call you, the boss. In fact, it was Kaidi who volunteered and wanted to call the boss Wu Song." She continued, "The general manager didn't think of any good solutions for a while. Although she was worried that the other party would be a hot gourd, she decided to protect the other party first and then make a decision. Does the other party have any identification documents on him? No documents were found. Let's call her Xiaohong for now, otherwise, she wouldn't have to worry about Samus and Catty. While Luo Guang was thinking about what happened to the guy who lost his memory, he continued to ask, is it really amnesia? Michaela, the doctor of the Wolves team, examined the opponent and found that he was indeed hit on the head and suffered a concussion, but she said that there is a possibility of amnesia, but this disease cannot be completely determined. Can't be sure. Catty replied, yes, after the Wolves brought her back, other people with medical certificates also examined her and came to the same conclusion. Luo Guang nodded and said, okay, then you can take her to a specialized hospital for a specialized examination. After all, we don't have the medical equipment at the training ground, so it's better to have it checked. We will continue to keep in touch after that. Copy that. After Kaidi finished speaking, she didn't hang up the phone. After much hesitation, she made up her mind and said, boss, why don't you come back and take a look? Luo Guang, who originally thought Kaidi had other things to report, paused and then asked, who is in the base now? Only the members of Angel Team, Wolf Team, and Tanya Team are here, the other teams are performing tasks outside. Kaidi knew the situation of each team well. Luo Guang thought for a moment, and all he needed to do for BSAA to hold a press conference was that he or Jill should be present. Moreover, he was very concerned about the current situation in Africa and was worried that it was the prelude to some big conspiracy. So he said, tell Samus to stay vigilant and protect the guy who lost his memory before I come back. Although they are not sure who the other party is, GIMZ should be prepared early, otherwise they will not be able to react and fight back immediately when they are involved in trouble. Received Kaidi's tone was a little happy for some reason, and she then repeated Luo Guang's instructions. The two exchanged pleasantries for a few more words. Luo Guang said goodbye, hung up the phone, and walked over to Jill. Luo Guang saw that Jill had put down her cell phone and was reading on her laptop, so he asked, huh? You guys finished chatting so quickly? Jill shrugged and replied, O'Brien has already made arrangements to directly transfer the resources originally used to publish the Institute's investigation report to this plan, so Chris said it doesn't matter whether the United Nations contacts him or not. Haha, then he can't blame you for waking him up. He hung up the phone right after he said this. Chris hung up the phone so quickly that Jill didn't even have the chance to say sorry. Luo Guang smiled, then his expression changed and became serious. Without waiting for Gil to ask, he said, after I return to the Lighthouse country, I will leave first and go back to the GIMZ army. Jill asked directly for the reason and said, did something happen? Luo Guang replied, my team rescued a person from the biohazard scene when they were on a mission. After hearing this, Gil also asked Luo Guang's previous question, why not leave it to Tarisef? Mercenaries with no identity information are hunting for the man saved by GIMZ. Gil understood what Luo Guang meant, which showed that the person's identity was extraordinary. Luo Guang continued, moreover, there have been many biohazard incidents in Africa recently. Although the scale is small, the origin has not been found. Africa is relatively backward. By the time GIMZ arrived, those who spread the virus had already been cleaned up and left, so it was useless for him to rush back. Jill thought, what virus is it? It's basically a biological crisis caused by the T virus. This virus is so common now, and many forces have it. Jill frowned, wondering who was behind it. Luo Guang nodded and replied, the enemy probably conducted experiments in Africa on purpose. We can only see if the amnesiac guy can provide some useful information. I understand. Jill understood Luo Guang's choice. Her boyfriend was going back to take charge of the overall situation. She continued, then I will go back to Europe directly after finishing this publicity matter, then I will talk to O'Brien and let BSAA Africa branch cooperate with your GIMZ. Luo Guang nodded and said, yes. Gil knew all of his plans and he felt reassured by letting her go to the press conference. After Luo Guang sent Jill to the door of the BSAA Americas branch, he turned around and set off for South Africa. After receiving the news that his boss was coming, Kaidi immediately went to the door of the office building to wait. Luo Guang got out of the car, said hello to Kaidi first, and then said, "Is the person with amnesia waiting?" Kaidi replied, "Yes, Sams and Wolves are with that person and waiting in the conference room." The two entered the conference room. Sams and Kaidi's people stood up and greeted Luo Guang. "Boss." "Hello everyone." Luo Guang smiled and nodded, said hello to everyone, and then sat down in the main seat of the conference room. "She is the survivor we found in the village of Aben Hatu," Sams said, "because she lost her memory and couldn't remember her name. We named her Xiaohong based on the red clothes she was wearing at the time." Luo Guang looked at Xiaohong, the smile on his face did not change, and said, "Her name is not Xiaohong, her name is Ada Wang." When he came in, he could tell at a glance that the person in camouflage uniform was Ada, but he didn't expect that the other person would be reduced to pretending to have amnesia. There was no particular reason why he thought Ada was faking amnesia. It was just because the other party was cunning Ada, and there were too many amnesia scenes in movies and TV series. In fact, humans are not that easy to lose their memory. Ada looked at Luo Guang with a puzzled face, seemingly puzzled by Luo Guang's words, and asked, "Do you know me? Can you tell me, who am I?" She had only heard the name of Wu Song, the boss of the GIMZ unit, and the two had never met, so she didn't know why the other party could name her true identity in one breath. When Sams and others heard Luo Guang's words, they immediately looked at Ada with vigilant expressions on their faces. They didn't say everyone is so miserable, how could it be fake amnesia, this kind of plot is only seen in movies and TV. Luo Guang said, "Why don't you know him? A famous multifaceted spy, an internationally wanted criminal, a survivor of Raccoon City, an agent of the HCF organization, what else is there? Leon's girlfriend." In case the other party really lost his memory, he specially added the title Lion's girlfriend. Luo Guang, who was observing the other person's face and expression, found that when Leon was mentioned, Ada's eyes dodged slightly to one side. Ada's tone was still confused, even a little aggrieved, and she said, I really don't know what you are talking about." Seeing the aggrieved look on the other party's face, Kaidi felt compassion and said, "Boss, is it possible that she really has lost her memory?" Luo Guang glanced at Kaidi and replied, "Kadai, help me make a cup of coffee and come over." Kaidi knew that he was not satisfied with what he just said and felt a little aggrieved, but he still did as he was told and left the conference room. Ada originally saw a friendly army and wanted to open a breakthrough from there, but the next second she was taken away by the boss named Wu Song. Doesn't this mean that the other party has recognized her identity? Luo Guang continued to stare at Ada and said, "It's okay if you don't say it, but our GIMZ is not a charity, and we don't want to feed you freeloaders, so I can only ask you to leave. I think those who want to kill you should also be happy to see it. Until you leave here." Ada's face still looked aggrieved, her eyes were red, and she said, "You are so heartless." Samus ignored the other party and asked, "Boss, do you know who the person you are chasing is?" Luo Guang shook his head and said, "I don't know, but it doesn't matter. There is no rule that the person being chased must be a good person, right?" Then he asked again, "Did you find nothing on her except the ID? The enemy is chasing her, either for her life or for the things on her body. Except for a pistol with blank bullets and a custom-made dagger, there was nothing else." Wolf Mother Rupert said, "The enemy threw a grenade, and she hit her head while trying to dodge." Demon Hector said, "I support the boss. Since this guy was a spy before, we can't risk getting into trouble." Except for Wolf Mother, who was reluctant to express opinions, the other members of the Wolf team nodded. However, Her not objecting and stopping her subordinates was actually a way to express her acquiescence. Samus looked at Luo Guang and said, "Boss, do you really want to do this? She may also be a good person and know the truth about the recent biohazard incidents. Did the BSAA find out anything? They received a report that someone was selling biological weapons on the black market, but neither we nor the BSAA saw any trace of biological weapons when we were solving the biochemical crisis." Luo Guang looked at Ada and said, "Have you thought about it? Are you telling the truth or a lie? You have to know that your current status as an international wanted criminal is a huge bounty. This is the killer. Ada's identity itself is not to be seen in the light." Ada sighed, her face changed and she regained her original calmness. She raised her hands to surrender and said, "You won, but I was not hunted down because I did something bad. Tell me about what we don't know." Luo Guang did not deny what the other party said. "First of all, the mercenaries who were hunting me should have been hired by Tri-Union." Ada had just started when Samus interrupted and asked, "Wait, Tri-Union? Do you have evidence?" She was still skeptical about whether Ada's identity was good or bad. Ada replied, "No, how could Sanlian make such an idiotic mistake?" "Then why do you think it was Sanlian?" "Because I escaped from the headquarters of Sanlian's West African branch." Luo Guang interrupted, "What did you steal again that got you hunted down?" Ada felt that the man named Wu Song had a familiar tone, and replied, "It may be evidence of Sanlian's manufacturing and selling biological weapons, but I haven't had time to analyze the data after I got it." She was doing a chivalrous thing, how could it be said to be stealing? "Where?" Luo Guang was naturally asking about the data. Ada replied, "I was hunted all the way to Abenhadu village. Before I ran out of ammunition and food, I hid the USB flash drive in a wooden house." Luo Guang turned around and asked Sams, "What's the situation in that village now?" Sams replied, "It has been blocked by the BSAA, and a wave of sterilization may be carried out in a few days." Ketty knocked on the door at this time and brought in the coffee. Knowing that she had just said the wrong thing, she was about to leave when Luo Guang called her. "Cuddy, go contact BSAA and ask them to suspend the sterilization operation in Abenhadu village. Tell them that there may be clues to the cause of the incident there." Cuddy nodded and said, "Got it." After that, she immediately withdrew and carried out the task assigned by her boss. Then, Luo Guang asked the Wolf team, "Wolf Mom, when you evacuated, did you deal with all the enemies?" "We did. When we came back, we didn't notice anyone following us." The answer was from Ninja Victor. The enemies retreated after knowing that they had encountered a tough opponent, and he was responsible for dealing with the fleeing enemies. Although Luo Guang believed that Victor could deal with all the enemies, if the enemies were really sent by Sanlian Company, then with the company's capabilities, he believed that the other party would definitely be able to find out that Ada came to the city and entered the GIMZ unit training ground. So, he gave the order, "Samus, tell everyone in the training ground to prepare. They may not sleep well recently, and the enemy may continue to send new mercenaries, or assassins." Samus agreed with Luo Guang's idea and nodded to indicate that he had received Luo Guang's order. "Meow, thank you for your reward, subscription, and votes. I learned some dagger usage skills tonight and found that there is actually a reverse grip.